Alchik, Chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. And I'd like to note that we are starting the meeting at 7:01 p.m. We are live streaming the meeting on MVTC's YouTube channel. Thank you to our staff. And we do have one at this point, Commissioner participating remotely, Nick Clemente, and we are expecting Paul Smedberg, but I don't believe he's joining us yet. And they're both. All right. My echo's gone, and so they will be participating remotely for personal reasons, or both are out of town today. And then I also want to welcome Commissioner Alternate Kirk McKike from Alexandria. Thank you for joining us. Good
Very happy to be here.
today.
Sorry that I'm not Sarah.
Yeah, those are some pretty awesome seats to fill, but we're happy you could join us.
Not like you.
And our commission secretary has confirmed that we have quorum. So this month's commission meeting is very full agenda. So I trust that you've all reviewed it. I'd like to recognize a couple of special guests. There may be others hiding in here as well. We do have WMATA General Manager, CEO Randy Clark is with us here today. Great to see you, Randy.
Senior.
Thanks for being in Virginia. Alexandria Dash General Manager and CEO Josh Baker, is he here?
He's gonna be just a little bit.
Okay, perfect. So welcome Randy, and we'll see Josh soon. And we do look forward to engaging with you this evening on topics very near and dear to our hearts and many of us in this room and online. First, I did want to make some special shout outs for some great news in our Northern Virginia transit space. First of all, it's been an exciting couple of weeks. Our transit systems, as 3 of our systems, received federal grants to help transition their bus fleets to zero emissions. So we'll be hearing more about that later today. Congratulations to the city of Alexandria and Dash, the Metro, and to Loudoun County for winning Federal Transit Administration grants under the Low and No Emission Grant Program. Very exciting. Also, congratulations to the Alexandria City Council for voting to move forward on the Duke Street Transitway BRT project. We love BRTs, which will be a great connection to the West End Transitway and to our Route 7 BRT, creating a wonderful BRT bus rapid transit network. So very exciting. And I also want to share excitement with my colleagues in Fairfax County. We voted to support the redevelopment at the West Falls Church Metro Station, which is also in alignment with the Route 7 BRT. And I think we have some more on the BRT on Tuesday. So a lot of BRT. And then finally, it's been an exciting couple of weeks. Oh, sorry, are we on the slide? No. It's been an exciting couple of weeks as our MVTC team has launched the regional Ride With Us campaign. And there it comes. There it is, Ride With Us. You can now plan your trip on novarides.org. I did go on it this morning. Access it on your iPad, on your phone, on everything you want. And it's a campaign focused marketing along the Yellow and Blue Line corridors this past month and throughout Northern Virginia for the rest of the summer. And I'm especially excited as the rest of my Orange Line opens up to be able to publicize that and ride back in here from Vienna. So nice job, MVTT team. Very excited about that. And now finally, I do want to applaud that it seems our region has the strongest transit ridership rebound. I know it's detailed, rebound in the country, according to the American Public Transportation Association. And we're going to take the wins where we got them. WMATA's Metro Rail ridership grew faster this past year than any other heavy rail system in the US. So I know we've got a few WMATA folks here today. And VRE led all US commuter rail systems up 114%. So congratulations to our VRE and the system. And then finally, Q, Fairfax Connector, and our other local transit systems also led the way in terms of ridership growth. So go Nova. That's some really exciting news. And so hope to keep that going. I'm sure it'll be a little low in the summer and then excited to see that continue in the fall. But before we move into the agenda items, I believe we have some public comments.
We
tonight.
did indeed. There was 2 public comments that were forwarded to all of you earlier this afternoon. One is from the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and they provided some comments in support of making sure that we provide financial support to WMATA in their time of need. And we also forwarded a comment from Mr. Whitfield sharing his concerns over the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority's Transform Rail in Virginia Capital Program.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And hopefully you all received those full comments. And I believe the comment makers are here with us tonight. So I want to thank them for their input and the participation in the public process. And so to that, we will now move on to action item 2. This is approval of the June 1st, 2020 minutes. Excuse me. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 1st, 2023? So moved and a second. I hope you caught those. Atkins was second. I don't know who moved it. Libby, perfect. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
I wasn't present at the meeting, so.
Thank you.
Don't know if you
Commissioner
interact.
Pike is abstaining from the votes. Any opposition? All right, and let me do a roll call vote. Nick Clem, and
We
you
had
have
some
Mr.
technical issues she's working on.
Okay, we're working on some technical issues. But I do see that Mr. Smedberg has joined us. Love technology. All right, I see Mr. Smedberg. Paul, if you can hear me, a roll call vote on.
Hi, Dahlia.
Hey, Paul, is that an aye for the meeting minutes from June 1st?
Yes.
Perfect, all right, and Nick, Mr. Clemente, if you want to unmute. Good, okay, well, we'll come back to it. I believe the motion passes, and with Mr. Smedberg voting aye. For tonight, we have 4 actions on the consent agenda. And you should have received that as well. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second, all right. Any further discussions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? And now a roll call vote for Mr. Smedberg.
Aye.
Aye, and Mr. Clemente, are you with us? Not yet, having some more issues. Okay, so to that, I believe the motion passes with Mr. Smedberg also voting aye. Wonderful, thank you on the consent agenda. Moving along quickly to the big heart of tonight's meeting. And I see that he's ready for us. We will be having a presentation. Randy, thank you so much for joining us here. The Orange Line in Virginia and the Silver Line, and thank you for joining us this evening. As you know, and as we all know, and I know you've got your team here as well, the health and stability of the Metro network is vital to our communities, our economy, and the overall health of our community and our people. Our recent study found that the transit network in Northern Virginia, of which Metro is the backbone, and we saw the details at our last meeting, generates $1.5 billion in statewide sales and income taxes to the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is the first study of its kind, I believe, that we've done to that extent. These are funds that can be used throughout the entire state to support things like schools and human services. We also found that without the strong transit network, traffic would come to a complete standstill, even more so than today here in Northern Virginia. Moving our people to and from District of Columbia and Maryland and across the region will require new lanes on every bridge that crosses the Potomac. We're very concerned about the financial health of Metro and know that we need to find collective solutions to create a dependable and growing revenue model that will give us the system we deserve. But we also know that we need to work collectively to identify ways to fix this financial model. That needs to come from both within Metro as well as from external sources. Our local governments are going through the same financial challenges with growing costs of labor. And so many changes in the past few years. So I do appreciate the recognition that we're all in this together and looking for collective solutions and a way forward. So to that, Matt also is the chair of the finance committee and with us here in person. Very good to see you. Paul Smedberg, who is with us remotely, is the chair of WMATA. Thank you for being with us. And I'd like to turn it over to you. If you want to go ahead and introduce Randy Clark.
Yeah, sure. And Paul, good to see you remotely.
Yeah.
I'll just give a few maybe contextual remarks. I think this is probably the most informed group and at this point, the entire, at least Northern Virginia, about Metro's fiscal cliff. At least I hope, because Paul and I have been really trying to keep everybody updated on a monthly basis about exactly how things have transpired, both from a fiscal 23 and 24 standpoint, and then looking forward ahead. But Randy's been our general manager now for I guess about 11 months. 11 months, 2 weeks, but he's not counting. And I think, I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I think we set out to do some things when he came on board. And I think the achievements have really been remarkable. The feedback from the board, kind of reflecting back at our last meeting, was how far we've come in less than a year, or just about a year, operationally speaking. And it's really put us in a position to have the discussion that we now need to have much better than it would have been had we tried to do this a year ago. So I think Randy was going to walk through kind of where we've been a little bit, what he's been focused on, and then what our challenge is that lies ahead. Paul, do you want to, anything you want to add?
No, I think that's nicely stated. And, the change in the last year under Randy's leadership really has been remarkable. And I think just organizationally in the safety area, operations area, and in many other ways, the organization has transformed a great deal in just the past year. So, we're doing our part to make sure that we're ready for this debate and that we earn not only our riders' trust and everything, but our regional partners, and knowing how important Metro is to the region. So, we look forward to this discussion over the next year or so, and we know it's going to be challenging, but I think we're up for it. And I think, some of the highlights Randy's going to talk about tonight will prove that we're going to be there and talking to NVTC and other groups all along the way here, making sure that we're coming up with a collective solution for the region that's going to make sense and that's going to make WMATA a sustainable organization into the future.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate your leadership, especially in these challenging times. And I know Virginia, we're anxious to see where we are and how we get from here to March, April next year as well. So with that, Randy, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, well, Chair and Kate, and everyone, thanks for having me here tonight. I have the opportunity once in a while to see some of you. For some I haven't seen in a while, good to see you again. But I think it's really important that we have these big open conversations about Metro. So, I appreciate what the chair and our finance chair mentioned, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say it all starts with board leadership. Matt has 3 phones over here. Paul talks to me probably 5 times a week. They are committed board members. They are very engaged. They represent you very well. And I can't really say enough about how much I feel the board has been supportive, but also having really just good conversations. Like it's really, I think we're creating a very mature process internally about how we're all engaging and being transparent, board staff, and then ultimately public and our partners. And I just want to, every time I get an opportunity, I just really want to highlight how much I appreciate the good board we have. We have a lot of really good board members that certainly are not doing it for big paychecks, right? They're doing it because they actually really care. So just always want to take that moment. As we start off, I thought what we'd talk about. I've been the opportunity to be the general manager for just over 11 months. In some ways, it feels like 11 days. In some ways, it feels like 11 years. Depends on the day, I guess. My wife says I am getting grayer, but I don't know. I'm going to chalk that up to just age, not the Metro job. But I thought it would be good to kind of start up framing up like what we kind of set up to do, and then we can get to the larger financial conversation. So first off, the orange line is coming along. I promise you, we are gonna be done of that section. We got 2 stations left on the 16th. I want to thank everyone for their patience during the phase 1 piece. I know that was a little bit of a challenge. I really appreciate Supervisor Alcorn, who happens to be an alternate board member. He provided some feedback. Fairfax staff, actually, before we started, came up with a really good idea. I think Mr. Bashadi's not with Fairfax anymore, but he had a really good idea. But between staff, comments from elected officials, the first couple of days of a bus shuttle always are a little bit of a challenge. And this was a big bus shuttle, like over 100 buses on the line. That's bigger than like some bus agencies in America. That was just on the shuttle. So we got our groove down in a few days. But the thing I'm most proud of is the team was very embracing of the comments and made the change. And that culturally, it speaks a lot to the Metro we're trying to deliver, which is if partners are telling us there's an issue, like let's engage with them and figure out the issue. And that involved partners in Arlington and in Fairfax on traffic patterns and other things. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank our partners to work with us. And I think this helps us as we ever have shutdowns in the future. And trust me, I'm not suggesting this area. We should be thinking about roadway network and how to dedicate space and all those types of things. So really good there. Also, Chair, you mentioned the $104 million grant. I see Chair McKay, other members of the Fairfax delegation, the supervisors. I want to just thank them for their partnership. I think that's a big deal. $104 million grant. It's the largest in America for the zero emission program. And we're doing it with our partner at Fairfax at the Cinderbed Garage, which will help on their projects and us. And I think that's a really good example of us needing to do more of that regionally, leaning into these partnership approaches, using some specialty expertise that Metro may have around, power and energy management, because we run a rail system, and what local agencies are trying to do for connecting parts that are not Metro. So just want to thank you for that. Hopefully we get an event coming up at some point to celebrate that. If we go to the first slide, what this first slide represents, I don't have a clicker, so I don't know how this is. I just say next slide. Perfect. Okay.
Back there.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do this. Thank you. So last year, with the board, we had a workshop and we talked about a lot of things, but we all talked about if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And I think we also knew this long-term funding conversation was going to come. And we said, if we're not running trains and buses, we're not going to have much of a conversation. And our job is to run service. That's what we do. We're connected to all these other things, public safety, homelessness, other special events, economic development. At the end of the day, we run service. And I think it's fair to say this time last year, we were not doing a great job of running service. Variety of factors, 7,000 series, COVID, on and on. We had a hole we had to dig out. And I cannot say enough of how proud I am of the Metro team. Bear down and got this done. But this list, it's funny, the board and I talked about this 2 weeks ago, and people were like, oh my God, I forgot some of this list. We put this together last August. So we did it really soon after I got there. And we said, what are our must achieves and some other customer service big wins we'd like to get done? And I know I won't go through all of them, obviously, but we got every single thing that we said we had to get done. And I think this is what we're really trying to say is we have to create plans and then work our plan and be really laser focused on what we're trying to accomplish, because we can't accomplish everything and we certainly can't accomplish everything at once. But these include things like Potomac Yard. That was a big deal for this region. It's been a long time getting there and we got it done. The Silver Line, we obviously had to get trains back in service. To do that, we also had to hire a bunch of people. We've hired 1,300 people at Metro in the last 11 and a half months, over 600 operators to deliver service. So that took a lot of real targeted effort to do that. And then there's a lot of other things on here as well, including last year. I think we easily forget, we had $180 million almost budget deficit last year that we used every tool in our toolbox to come together in fiscal management and also use some formula funds from preventive maintenance to close the rest of it to get to a closed budget without actually going to our partners to have a conversation. So anyway, you'll see some of those other things, but I want to set up that, again, I'm really proud of how the board and the staff came together with a plan and we execute that plan really well. The next slide is really an outcome of that plan. So to me, the way, and I think I've said this to you all, I think the first meeting I had, we will determine if we're doing well by if our customers say we're doing well, not the Randy Clark on my floor with a bunch of senior staff saying we're really good. And then we're living in a bubble, not certain people saying on Twitter that we're horrible no matter what we do. What are our customers I guess there's an alternative, by the way, out there. I'm just saying, to Twitter now. We're gonna get on that as well. So more communication. But we are really trying to say what's the pulse of our customers every day? Are you feeling like the product that you deserve is delivering? So last year, we were at 68% on the rail side for customer satisfaction, and we closed out our quarter at 84%, which tied a historic high in 2013. That moved the needle significantly. On the bus side, at one point, I think we were at 72, 73, but we're only a little bit above on the bus side. Now, the bus side challenge is, as traffic has come back, the average person on the bus gets a little upset that their trip time is getting worse than it was. So there's only so much of that we can manage, but there are things on the bus side that we know we have to still do better. And we're going to be really focused on bus heavily this year. But I use that as an illustration of, again, be targeted and we're after results. The next slide. This was our strategic plan. Lots of people in this room got engaged directly on this. I appreciate Kate, MBTC, we engaged on that. Our partners in the district, Montgomery, Prince George's, different places, business community, other groups. I really appreciate the board's leadership. The board took on this strategic plan. This wasn't a staff-driven effort. It was very collaborative. Ultimately, the board approved this plan. The real hallmarks here were stakeholder engagement. I've had some people told me that Metro has never engaged them that way on a strategic plan before. So I took that as a positive sign that people are feeling, again, invested in the system. But I think the thing that we were most focused on is being transparent, really laying out what we're trying to do and having good open discussions. I think we had probably 4 board meetings just about the strategic plan to get it approved so everyone could see what we're working on. And that, I think, is really powerful. So if board members change or jurisdictional leaders change or staff change, we have a North Star and we don't just every 6 months say, well, what's our priority, right? This is the organization and how we're going to move forward. The next slide, some highlights from our FY24 budget that just went into effect about a week ago. Increased bus and rail service, starting with a week ago with on the rail side. This is a really cool fact, but Metro now is running more rail service than any time in its history. So some people say, well, we used to run higher frequency at certain rush hours. That is true. But now we're running really good service all day and on the weekend. So you may recall, and I lived in DC in the region a while back, it was very great at rush hour, but in midday and evening and weekends, the service, is pretty good spread between frequency of service. The business model of transit really has to adapt and change. And so we are really not talking about adapting. We have adapted. And I think that's really powerful. And we're seeing that. So midday, evening, and weekend ridership. So weekend ridership is on the rail side, over 80% recovered. Some weekends, better part of 100. And on the bus, we are over ridership than we were during the pandemic. And that's because we're delivering a good product. We have to do that in all hours of the day, all days a week for all types of customers. And I think that is the long-term going to be the strategy of Metro to bring us back to where we need to be. We changed the fare structure a little bit. We introduced for the first time ever a regional low-income fare program called Metro Lift. And I know we're working collaboratively with everyone, different jurisdictions to get more and more people enrolled on that. Basically, is if you're enrolled in SNAP in Maryland, Virginia, or DC, you get 50% fare at Metro. We had hundreds of people the first couple of days. So we're just going to keep connecting with partners and getting more and more people that kind of equitable access to the transit system. We capped Metro access fares at $4, which is a really big component that the disability community was really talking about. And I think the board and staff heard that loud and clear. Again, putting kind of action to our strategic plan. We're working on our Better Bus Initiative. Many jurisdictions in this room, including a lot with MVTC, about how we can have a better regional bus system. And we should have a lot more conversation about that later. Is that we could do a lot with that. Zero emission bus transition, the board approved. We've actually moved the goal in 3 years this year to 2042 will be full zero emissions versus 2045. And we have 2 of our facilities under construction and now a big grant to get the 3rd one under construction. And our first 60-foot electric bus showed up about 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point. 8,000 series fleet of the future. We're doing some design changes. Some people have probably seen around that. Much more customer friendly, much more focused on safety and moving through the vehicles. A vehicle is going to be with us for 30, 40 years. And those vehicles are going to be built regionally in Maryland. in Hagerstown. So Hitachi is actually pretty far along building their factory, which I think is going to be a nice value add for our region to have great manufacturing jobs, and that'll help long-term with our maintenance management and standards. And then something that this group, I know specifically, well, I think the first meeting I went to with the MVTC, I got specifically asked about the 16M. And we delivered the 16M. So I figured it was good to come back and say we did what we were asked to do.
That's why you made it.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I don't know if I left that meeting and said, hey, we got to get that 16M. We also got the 11Y back in operation from Mount Vernon to DC. And I know that is people in Alexandria specifically, there was some conversation around that. So got those back in service. The next slide, each one of you might have a copy of this. We just passed them all out. If you don't, we'll give you one. It's a little accomplishment sheet, some facts and figures. I don't have to go through them all. A couple ones that I think are really important are we're delivering 73% more trains than we were this time last year. We got all this trains, like I mentioned, back in service. We opened 7 stations this year, all in Northern Virginia. Pretty amazing. We got the Yellow Line project done. That was a big disruption, especially to the Alexandria side. And I know that was a little bit of pain, but that should be good for now decades to come. We got that project done not only on time, we got that project done under budget. So the team worked very, very hard to accomplish that. Anyway, you can go through them all here, but there's some stuff here that is kind of under the hood and not the big sexy stuff that gets the attention that I think is really important. We're getting more and more people on a digital wallet versus paying with cash. That is long-term really positive. We have customer service hours at our contact center that now go into nights and weekends to actually engage with our customers versus being 9 to 5. Like kind of the basics, if you will. I feel really good about the team doubling down on just being very customer centric, which will play long-term cultural dividends for the organization. So happy to go through these if there's any questions later on, but I just wanted to highlight some of those. The next slide, I thought we should talk a little bit about some recent ridership trends, but don't worry, I'll get to the bad stuff in a second. I just figured we'd go through some of the good stuff first. I know a lot of people are really excited about the Silver Line. We've had over 1.8 million trips on the Silver Line extension since we opened it. Over 610,000 trips to Dulles Airport so that's mid-November. So I think that's really starting to pay some dividends there. An interesting nugget we want to put in here. So McLean Station happens to be where Capital One's big office complex is. When they went back the direction of back to the office, the first day back to the office and every day since, we've had 1,000 plus on every day that they're in the office versus the days of not in office. So it quickly goes to show you, this isn't just the federal government, which we would love to see more back in office, but it's everyone and more people being, if you will, the normal engagement. Metro is obviously a choice that people want to use to get there. Potomac, where we said about 1,000 entries. Obviously, that's a long-term development project, right? With Virginia Tech and some other things. So as construction keeps moving through, we expect that to really go well. On June 6th, we had over 800,000 people back on the system. So that's our post-pandemic high. We got room to go, no question, but I think 800,000 people is nothing to just push off. That's a lot of people that were moving. July 4th, I don't know if anyone took in the fireworks. It was on Metro. So we had 410,000 on rail, which is the highest July 4th we've had since 2015. So the highest in 8 years Metro delivered rail service without problems, which, trust me, I was very, very, that's a day for us to, there's some days for us to shine. Cherry blossom, we shine for this region. Opening day, we shine. This July 4th, we shine. And I think we're working so hard for those opportunities. So a lot of people that maybe are not daily commuters can get that trust back to Metro is reliable for them to use the service. So really proud of how well the team did. And I put a couple Virginia statistics in there just on related to July 4th, but it had 86,000 people through the Roslyn Tunnel and 43,000 on the Yellow Line Bridge. So a lot of people from Virginia. I personally worked the platforms on July 4th at Smithsonian. And at one point, I didn't know where all these trains were coming from. We were running so many, but it was unbelievable to me how many people were going, how do I get to Springfield? How do I get to Wheelie Reston? How do I get to Ashburn? How am I getting to Ballston? Which there's a lot of people that don't use the system a lot with families. that it was clear they are, really try to use Metro to enjoy that event. So I just want to sprinkle a couple stats in there to show that's a lot of people from Virginia that were using the system. The next slide is an updated, kind of a little bit like MVTC study. These are some updated, really important regional connections around Metro. 60% of the population lives within a half a mile of Metro rail station and bus stop. 70% of the jobs in the region, same area, and 50% of our employers. So those are some updated numbers. The bottom part is also updated. So within a half a mile of Metro rail stations, it used to be 4% of our land, but now that we've joined, Loudon has joined, Loudon's not a small place. So the land went down to 3%. But the property value has increased to 328 billion. So 30% of our regional property tax base is based around Metro. 40% of our jobs, 60, and then you see all the office development, new apartments, affordable housing. It's all happening. I think it's pretty clear Northern Virginia is doing incredibly well with all these themes too. So I just thought that we'd show the updated numbers on all those. The next,
one thing just to add on this, so because we don't get into it as much in Virginia because we don't have quite as much going on, but the joint development program that Metro has is the best in the country. I think a lot of people don't realize that, how far ahead of the curve Metro is on joint development of our property and stations with partners like Amazon and others, but that is a revenue stream for us, and it also is addressing affordable housing. So, we have more land kind of in Maryland and DC, just who owns the property, but we did have, I think, one at one recently in Virginia.
We got a couple of recent ones. But we have a couple coming up. We have one at Braddock Road.
Yep.
And we have one at Eisenhower.
Yep.
So the construction laydown area for our new building, we want to make sure we activate that. And that is a good point. I didn't realize how good the program was till I got here. It's clearly a national transit leader. We have very talented staff, and our big message to all of we had a big developer workshop, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had almost all the major developers and at Metro headquarters. We are open for business. If we have a parcel, we want to activate that parcel. And if it could financially be beneficial to Metro, great. Even if it can't, and we can get housing and we can create a place for a community, we want to do that too. So we encourage you all, if you have ideas or if you have partners that want to get more involved with us, just reach out. And if someone says, well, I tried that, and Metro was, in 2008, I tried that. I'd ask them, 2008's been a long time. Like, pick up the phone and we'll try it again. But appreciate it.
A bit more details. These joint partnerships or public-private partnerships on land that Metro owns. The private entity builds a facility which normally includes affordable housing.
It could be a variety of different things. So we don't have to have private, we could do jurisdiction and Metro partnership. So if you want to activate a site for affordable housing with us, we could look at that. Amazon used their, the nonprofit wing, the Amazon Housing Trust Fund, to do a lot of partnership with us. So it's our land, they invest in the housing, jurisdictional does some stuff depending on where it's at. We have one in the district that the district has funding to do a library on part of our property, and then we're going to move our kind of park and ride and some other aspects, and then they want to do joint development around that. So any and all options should be on the table. Again, we have space. We don't have fields of open space. I want to dispel that. We don't have we have a lot of open parking lots. So they have to be, we have infrastructure improvements that have to happen. We don't have these tracts of beautiful spaces of, 15 acres around King Street, Metro Station as an example to invest in. But wherever there is land that can be better optimized, we want to be a partner to make that happen. The next slide is path forward. So, we'll start the theme here of what some might think the theme is negative. I'm going to be the eternal optimist. I actually really think, and I think the chair said this at our media briefing last week, the board. This could be a great opportunity for us once and for all to solve this Metro kind of structural funding issue that was identified in 1976. Because I want to really ground everyone that we don't have just an FY25 fiscal issue. That is not the case. And no one should leave this conversation or any conversation thinking that if we just figure out how to solve $750 million, this problem's solved. It is far from solved. Because the next year, inflation is going to make, even if we solve 750, then the next year could be 150. 200, and the year after that it's 150. We have a structural issue that has to be resolved. And our goal is to get that 750 down. I'm not sure yet, but we are doing every single thing we can at the organization from a fiscal management point of view. I'm cautiously optimistic we're going to get it down a bit, but that's not getting down into like 400, 500, 600. You know, if we can get that down $40-50 million, we are going to do that, obviously, but it's going to take everything we got to do that. And we're trying to establish internally all out of cost fiscal management targets in departments to really weed out every little efficiency we can. But there's only going to be so much, if you will, maybe an old Texas saying, meat on the bone to really drive that down. There's only so much we can do on those categories, but I don't want you to think that we're not taking that serious and try to save every dollar we can. We obviously backstop the last couple of years with the federal fiscal relief money, the COVID funding. And I think you all know this. I think we have the best federal delegation on transit in the country. And I have no problem saying that. You know, I came from a state that wasn't as supportive. To have a delegation that is incredible. I've had the opportunity to spend some time recently with our senators, little correspondence once in a while with some of our representatives. They are very supportive of Metro. They always have been. They really stepped up with this funding, and I don't think we should just forget that, right? They did a lot of work for several years, and we wouldn't be even where we are today without them. The other thing I just want to highlight before we really get into the facts and figures here is the second last bullet, which is we do not have a solved capital program either. We have a better situation on the capital program. Many people in this room, actually I know a whole bunch of people in this room, but a lot of people in this region really did yeoman's work in 2018 to make the capital funding come together. Unfortunately, $500 million in 2018 is not $500 million in 2023, let alone 2030. So it was a good solution to get through a Metro that was literally falling apart. And the team in Metro has invested that money, and we have a very good, safe system. And the only reason we're running the great service we are today is because of those investments. We have great escalators and elevators. We have great track. Our power cabling and power substations are better. Our signaling system is better. That's the ultimate one that needs a lot more work. Our rolling stock is better. These investments really matter. So, you know, on behalf of the organization, thank you for everyone that stepped up with that. That money, though, is not here forever. Well, I should say, the funding's here forever. What it delivers is not here forever. So based on interest rate and how we execute our plan, at current spend rate, it's about FY29 and FY30. All we'll have money left in the $500 million dedicated is to do debt servicing. We will not be able to continue our state of good repair and modernization projects. So interest rates collapse in half in the next year. Maybe that gets us to 2031. Where I'm really worried about, you know, being ultimately responsible in the organization is at some point, if we don't have good line of sight on solving that problem, we are going to have to change how we manage our capital money and make decisions. So we can stretch that money and not run out in 29 and 30. So we may have to halt a lot of projects in the next couple of years so we can make that last to 2035 and only do the very bare bone critical safety stuff versus real good modernization that we all may want to deliver for the region. So I say that as we move to the next slide, which is I really think we got to start solving capital and operating together. It's great that they got this capital piece got resolved in 2018 for a period of time, but they really need to be coupled more in philosophy, even though they could be seen as two buckets from an accounting point of view. Philosophically, I've had people say to me, how are you building new electric bus facilities and ordering new trains, but have no money next year to run them? I'll be honest, I don't have a great answer for that because it's irrational for the average person that doesn't live in an operating cap. The average person that votes for you all doesn't have an operating and capital budget. They just live their life, right? And then they figure out how to make repairs and other things and whatnot, right? By those two different buckets, we are modernizing and building our infrastructure without knowing how we're going to run it. That puts us in a difficult fiduciary responsibility of saying, how do you move forward on certain projects without that certainty, right? So I use that to set up this operating conversation. I mentioned the 750 million we'll hit next year, hoping to get that down a bit. This shows you on the slide color-wise, kind of where it grows. Up to FY35, it ends up being about $1.2 billion. And again, you know, that's a long period of time, as we just saw the last 3 years, between a global pandemic and record inflation. 10, 12 years, a long time to plan out, but generally speaking, this is where we would project to. It's clear that where we're at is the federal relief got us through. And I think in a lot of ways, inflation has hurt us worse than the pandemic. Pandemic will be a longer lasting piece because change in behaviors, but for just the pure immediacy of the funding and financial management, the inflation really spiked us. You're all dealing with that in your local governments as well, or local businesses, right? But you'll see where fare and other revenue kind of grows, a very slight incline. Overall costs are just much higher. And you see where we got our spike. And then again, then they grow more normalized, but we got some big spikes that just happened there. The white dashed line represents basically if we back into 100% full ridership, because I hear this, well, if we just had everyone back on the system, this would be solved. It would not be solved. It would be less of an issue. But the white line represents if we had back to full ridership, that's still the deficit that we would be running into. If we move to the next slide, you've been asked a lot about what are the main buckets or drivers of the $750 million? And again, we're being at probably a 5,000 foot level here, right? So to summarize, but there's three big drivers on this. One is the decreased revenue since the pandemic. So that was multiple years of just depressed ridership and therefore fare revenue. And as the chair mentioned, we've grown back pretty significantly, but we're still down and we came back 67%. It shows you how low ridership was for 2.5 years to 3 years here. I mean, just very low ridership. So that mattered, and that hits things like parking and advertising and other things. So that's about 288 million, right? Then we have inflation and collective bargaining agreement. And the inflation obviously drove a lot of CBA stuff, but this is energy costs, fuel costs, parts, supplies, commodities, all of those things. Plus our 70% of our cost is labor, of which, overwhelming amount of our workforce is part of the CBA. And in that last CBA, they got a significant increase the last couple of years because it was tied to COLA, cost of living increase, right? Listen, the employees are doing their job. They signed a fair contract or a contract that they did. And this is the details of the contract. And so that obviously has caused a pretty big piece, so 266 million. Then we have jurisdictional subsidy credit. I wasn't here at the time, but most of you know about this, but basically the board voted the 2020, sometime in 2020, to basically say, keep part of your subsidy so you could actually look after your local costs. Because I think it's fair at the time, the world was kind of falling apart. No one really knew what was happening. Obviously, the economy has turned out much better than people expected, and a lot of local and state jurisdictions have turned out financially probably better than what people would have predicted in 2020. Neither here nor there. That was the credit back to the jurisdiction, plus 2 years of non-3% escalation growth that's normal. So you put all that together, call it $200 million. That's generally how the 750 kind of comes together from drivers. We go to the next slide. So the next slide is, we presented this to the board, obviously got a fair amount of media attention. So I'm sure everyone has seen a version of this or a narrative of this. As I mentioned, we don't really have an ability to cut costs without cutting service because most of our service is labor. And I want to give a little nuance to this because I think this gets lost a little bit in the conversation sometimes. We are a very high fixed cost business model. So an example would be, we have to inspect track multiple times a week, no matter how many trains we run. We have a 24-hour control center. We have station managers. We have elevator escalator technicians, AC, air conditioning, and you name it. So it's very little money for us. That's why this year, to give the board a lot of credit for doing this, we are running more service than we did last budget year, but for not that much more money. For only about 2%, you can get about 10% more service. Because if you're running 8 trains an hour, another train an hour is a nice increase in service, but the marginal cost is one more operator. Every other thing is more or less fixed. For us to go the opposite direction, we have to really cut into the bone to save money. And we have a great standard here at Metro. Compared to most transit agents in this country, they're not staffed with station managers at every station. We should have pride by that. Our stations are the cleanest transit stations in America. Yeah, once in a while, someone says they see something. Universally, our stations are clean. We have almost 1,000 elevator and escalators, way more than anyone else in the country. We have great uptime on those. We have great digital signage. We have an expectation of a high level of security and safety. So to deliver all of that stuff, the only thing we can really do is cut service, which means costs and trains. So the staff did an analysis, and that would really, to get the balanced budget, and this assumes that we would still have the elasticity of ridership, right? Obviously, there's some basic assumptions in this kind of model, right? That we've never gone through anything like this, nor should we ever do the experiment to try this. But we would have to cut about 67% of our service to balance the budget if it's just straight on Metro balancing the budget. So that would basically reduce, we'd be down to, I think it's about 37, 38 bus lines. Sorry, I don't have the exact number for me, but give or take something like that. We wouldn't run rail service after 9 to 9:30 at night, and trains that we are currently running, take a place like, Roslyn that gets right now a train every 3 to 4 minutes. You're talking that each one of those lines could be 20 minutes, just like that. So it functionally doesn't exist the way we know Metro since the place was founded. And it's certainly not going to be a reliable way for anyone to use the transportation system. And all of our special events are basically over, and our ability to connect to airports and things of that are pretty much, very limited. We would also only have the capacity on the rail side to handle about 300,000 people a day. Well, today we're going to move 400,000, and our budget is to get back to 75%. So we have 100,000 people that rode the system today wouldn't be able to fit on the trains. And our goal is to be back to probably 500,000 by the end of the year. So obviously that's a problem. We're carrying almost 400,000 people a day on the bus system, and we don't have the capacity for 200,000. So we have, serious death spiral kind of issues here. But we want to kind of lay this all out. The overall expenses are almost $1 billion, but obviously then we lose the revenue from the tickets, which gets us into a net of about 750. Obviously, the part that is also very big impact, and there's an economic impact to this, let alone just at Metro, is it's probably equivalent to about 40% of our workforce gets laid off or not working with us. 5,300 people is a lot. We're a big employer in this region that helps drive the economy as well, plus people that contribute to the economy in other ways. So that'd be a big impact.
And the very bottom there, we're in a jurisdictional crowd.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to point out that this assumption is that every jurisdiction is still paying its full jurisdictional subsidy.
Yeah,
So there is no corresponding reduction in subsidy with the reduction in service. You're still paying for this level of service. You're just not getting it.
Yeah.
Did we give relief to the jurisdictions on their subsidy payment during the pandemic? We did, right?
that's correct. That's what I mentioned earlier.
All that on the slide.
On the red slide, yeah.
Okay, and are we back to paying our full subsidy now?
Yes and no. So yes, we're paying the full subsidy, but we haven't backfilled and replaced that roughly $200 million. That
Retroactively
Yeah,
applying.
exactly.
5% raises
Yeah.
that would have happened.
Yeah, so
Yes.
one with the subsidy and 2 years of 3% escalation. So by,
Right.
the compounding 2-3% obviously matters as well.
So we had a gap that created a shortfall.
Yeah.
And we're back to what we were doing, but we didn't fill in the gap.
That's
right.
right. Yeah,
But I just wanted to point out the jurisdiction.
yeah, that's a very,
Given the crowd.
very good point.
Yes.
Yeah,
You started a whole, no.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to start a thing, but
We'll get to
you pay the same and you get much,
Yeah.
much less. So the next slide, and I think this is probably my last one. I mentioned the capital part earlier, and I think this talks about it a little bit, but I really think this is an important point. And I know we're gonna be, uber focused on operating, rightfully so, because it's service levels, but the capital really cannot get lost in this conversation. Yes, it might feel like we have 5 years. We do not have 5 years. We have 5 years if we at Metro then are then forced to then manage that cash in a totally different way, which will then ultimately lead to system inefficiency and state of good repair and safety issues long term. So I just highlight that because so many people work so hard to get us back to being such a great system that we shouldn't take a step back on the quality of the system that we're delivering. So with that, and obviously I always want to point out Priya Regina and her team are constantly working with our delegation to make sure that and that, that's not just a guarantee every time. There's a lot of hard work by a lot of people to make sure that happens. But knock on wood that we'll keep delivering on the PREA as well. So with that, I end with a couple slides of thank you and great slides of us doing fun stuff together, and hopefully a great future ahead. But appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation and welcome any comments, thoughts, suggestions, and ways we could all work together.
Awesome.
Thank
First of
you.
all, thank you, Randy, for an excellent presentation. And I love that this last slide goes from, I believe, it was one of the coldest openings we had to quite a warm
That was a cold
opening.
No question.
I still remember Sharon Boulevard was there quite early and for quite a long time, so I was very impressed. But no, thank you. I know my colleagues have quite a few questions. I want to start again by thanking you and Regina and Greg from your team and others who are here, Matt and Paul and Walter, and your entire board, as you said, and Canik, yes, thank you. And Canik, and thank you for moving out to DC to tackle this very exciting budgetary time. So we're glad you're here. And I know
Dahlia,
yes.
Madam Chair, if I could just say one thing, I want to
Well,
really say thank you to the GM for coming tonight and, to really laying it out in a very clear, concise way of the challenge that we all have together. And I hope, we're able to work collaboratively, particularly with NVTC. I know it would mean a lot to Matt and me to be able to do that, and all our partners in Virginia to really solve this issue. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Paul. And so before I turn it over to my colleagues, big thanks to you. We love having you out here. We'll see you soon. All the way to Vienna when it opens. Come out to my office.
I will say this, I'll leave it this. I welcome every person in this room to be on the service. We'll go, if you like, I'll go ride the train or bus with you, or other members of the board and the team. I can't say enough how much we need people out talking up the service and getting people back on the service. We're running great service again. And I think it's really important that, and I guess my ask back would be, our first ask would be making sure that your constituents all know that, we're back in pretty good shape and that the service is reliable and they can count on it. So you have a lot of ways to talk to people, and I think we all have that joint responsibility of getting more people back on the system.
And Madam Chair, if I could, just one other
Yes,
quick
go ahead,
thing.
Paul.
One thing that Randy didn't highlight tonight, but I know one thing that we've had a lot of discussions with him about is just internally what's happened with the organization, breaking down the silos, teams working together, proper alignment, all those things that are going to make Metro a more efficient and effective organization. And that, is something that, wasn't mentioned tonight really, but it's something I know that has been really important for the organization to move forward and to tackle a lot of those issues that Randy highlighted on that first or second slide there. So.
Absolutely. And thank you, Paul. Ditto on that. Really appreciate that. I think that management is very important on that and getting through all of this. I have a couple things and then I'll turn it over. I'll probably start on this side this time, my colleagues. So first of all, I love that you brought up, let's work together. Any land we own, actually we have somewhere we and you own, and I think there's some setting opportunities where when I first came into office, I was so careful, it's going to be tough. So happy to hear that you're open to looking at projects. And we have quite a few specific questions. I think the big one I want to ask, and like Paul said, I really appreciate that you've kept it kind of high level, helping us and the community understand what we're facing and what we could be facing. I think what I think would be helpful for us, and in the spirit of collaboration, and saying there's a lot we're all going to have to do, and we know, I think here you probably shared scenario A and probably scenario Z or D, the ideal scenario if we're able to fully fill this 750 million gap next year. I think you shared maybe, I heard up to 50 million that could get cut ish. So maybe that's the first I've heard.
Well, yeah, I'm saying we are going to do everything we can. I just didn't want anyone to walk away and go, oh, you might have this 350 million. Like, I just try to give a general, if we can get it down to that, I think we've done an incredible job. I don't know if we can get to that, but we are going to do everything we can to get that number down.
So I know it's still early in the process. I think it's good that we're working through this with quite a bit of time. And then you've got, scenario Z, doomsday, I call it, if we really have to cut the service at 67% and really hurt I think our system irreparably for a long time. So my question is somewhere in between. I think some of those details to better understand, and I know we'll have probably some questions about bus versus rail and understanding there. But breaking it down, both, I guess, on your end, going from what's within that 750 million and what are the scenarios? What are the things we can break down out of it? I think there's a lot of questions about the details of what's in that 750 million and what are the alternate scenarios if we can't get the full funding, which we know is going to be tough for all of us. What are other options? What are you all looking at? What happens if we get to a certain amount that's not 750, but it's half or 2/3 or a third? I don't.
Yeah, I guess, so we are not gonna be putting out a bunch of alternative scenarios because that's just going down a rabbit hole.
Right, but we do know what
yeah.
that means.
Yeah, and this is not a service plan. We are being at a 20,000 foot level to give people understanding of severity. When you go to do a service plan, you have a full Title VI analysis. So it's not just like, oh, we're cutting this, cutting that. There's a process around that. It's like if you add service or make any modification. So there's a whole like formal process around that.
Sorry, and to clarify, 750 is for the whole thing. So I know we're A, gonna be curious what that means for Virginia. And B,
Yeah.
you know, what's within that, right? What are you all looking at to help reduce that? I think you gave
So,
a number.
Again, internally, we're gonna try to manage every single dollar we can. Right now, it looks like we'll have a little theory surplus from this year because we managed the place pretty tightly. We're gonna try to move that over. Again, we've got a little task force internally trying to squeeze every little ounce we can. I mean, I think the previous general manager a few years ago was pretty public and said, listen, there's only so much left to squeeze out of this thing, right? But you know, we're gonna fresh eyes and post-COVID, maybe there's a different couple things, but it's not gonna move the needle significantly. I just, you know, but I don't want to pretend that if we could save 10 or 12, 15 million, that's not important, but it's not solving so to your root question, if it all comes down to service. So if we don't have 750, then, and let's say our deficit is 100 million, then we cut $100 million of service and we go through a formal process of what that would look like. So that's all we have. There is no, people ask me, what's option A, option B? There's cutting service or running service. That's it. That's all we do. I'm sorry to be that blunt, but that's all we do. We run service.
And so I'll do one follow-up and then I'll turn it over. And I know we've got a team and a VTC really looking at, I think there's one other area, which is other revenue generating ideas. Some of those may be feasible from next year. Some of those may be longer term. So other ways to generate revenue, which I think has been looked at in the past. So maybe, I don't know, Matt, or you might have more on that.
We're open to any and all ideas, but I find it hard to believe that there's many ideas out there that are going to actually be significant, but more importantly, structural. So a one-off thing, like say you had make it up, you had a piece of property and sold it for $25 million. Well, the next year, you don't have a piece of property to sell for $25 million. Not that we have one to sell for 25 million. I just use that example. So I think we keep grounding everyone that we have a structural issue and there's not going to be a silver bullet.
Well, I will pause there. Thanks, Randy. I will
Thank you.
start over here with Chair McKay and then we'll work our way around this way.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Randy, and for putting it out, as others have said, the way you have, because this is, you know, a massive regional challenge. And I guess I want to start by asking, I think, a question that Supervisor Palchik was trying to get at a little bit, which is, we know the 750 million figure. How is that attributed to your regional partners? So if you looked at it, you know, existing formula, what would that look like? Obviously, that might not be the way.
Yep.
Clearly, we want to solve this, but can you give order of magnitude of the shares of the 750 million by jurisdiction, or at least by state in this case, and the district?
Yeah, so what we want to do is do that in the fall. We got to close our books for this year. So we're already a week after fiscal close. We got to know what that 750 is really going to be. So again, if it's going to be 725, it's a little different. If it's 700, it's a little different. If it's 740, it's a little different. So I don't want to purposely, we don't want a bunch of different numbers floating around. We are clearly, Regina's already had a lot of conversation with JCC members. We are going to, as soon as we close our books and then really definitively can say what that number is, we want to get it out to everyone. There's a nuance too. There's a number with 3% cap, because we currently have a law about a 3% cap. And then there is, you have to break the cap to actually solve this anyway, because the 3% doesn't work, right? So then what does the formula look like without a 3% cap? So we want to make sure that when we do that, no one is conflating those and can be very transparent to see that. I think it's really important that we all don't have numbers that are hypothetical yet. We want to give impact of service, but you have my personal commitment, and I think Regina's worked with all the JCC members. As soon as we get to close, so basically probably just post Labor Day, we'll probably have a really good sense, and then we can start showing, I think, walking through the board meeting and other things, showing what those scenarios could start looking like for, like, if you will, impact to both state and jurisdictional partners.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that, and you partly answered it because of the Virginia nuance. I mean, clearly, to solve the portion of this that is Virginia's is going to take General Assembly involvement, clearly. And so the earlier we know that number and how close that is to the cap and how the law in Virginia might have to be changed on that is huge. And, secondly, we likely in Virginia will need General Assembly support for whatever mechanism is used to generate the revenue too. Because I think it's pretty clear, I don't want to speak on behalf of all local governments here, but it's not going to be on the back of real estate taxpayers, which means we're going to have some other way to generate that revenue. And knowing what that figure is we're trying to solve for is going to be extremely important as we head to this General Assembly session in particular, because of the timeliness here that we're talking about. I mean, this is, as you mentioned earlier, we don't have the luxury of time here. But we have a legislative process that we don't even have a budget right now in Virginia, embarrassingly. And so there's some things here that are going to have to happen. And so the earlier we can get those numbers, I think, the better. And I know that's what you're working on.
Yeah, and we want to definitely, and I think last year, I'll say board member Letourneau told me this, so I'll just take his word for it as our finance chair. We went into our budget process earlier than ever last year, and I think we did it a little more transparently. And we tried to do that in a way so you would have more certainty as you formulated your budgets. And at the end, there's always this little tweaking at the end, but within like 1% or something or whatever. But we'll do that again. We want to get out in front of this in the fall, so you have your plans for the year ahead.
Good. And real quickly, lastly, and it's kind of in the weeds a little bit. I don't necessarily want to go in the weeds, but you mentioned 1,299 new hires. Are we at full staff? I mean, how many more vacancies? And I ask this question because you're at, 70% of your budget's personnel, which sounds like a lot, but I mean, I know in Fairfax, ours is 80.
Yeah.
So it's not out of alignment. But when it's that big a part of your budget, you got to start thinking about, what that means long terms and in terms of, how many positions you have and do you have the right mix and the right number? And clearly, related to that, I just want to get from you if there's any update on the automatic train control and if that mechanism plays any role in the personnel needs that we need to be thinking of.
Yeah, so ATO, I'll answer latter and then come back if I can. So ATO will not impact staffing because we're going to have a human being in that train. If we work towards having platform screen doors, which you would see at, say, some places in Europe or Asia, which is the most modern living rail system you can get, which we should work towards long term. There's no question it's the safest and most cost efficient, and in energy management, everything else, customer experience. Then you could work towards that next level of automation and then maybe redeploy or rethink your staffing model on the vehicles themselves. ATO won't do that at this point. We are, this budget, I think we've got a couple dozen more headcounts, and we have a whole team in there, this transformation office, looking, both on the labor, like if you will, the unionized side. Are there some things that we could be more creative and efficient with? And we're being very open with our labor partners on that. We're everyone that does a good job, I want to do a good job, and they deserve to be comp for that. And then on the non-representative side, do we really need 2 of those? Can we do 1 of those? Can we consolidated call centers? We have 3 or 4 different call centers. We're going to start consolidating this that year. That'll drop from 2.5–3 million a year in savings. Again, it seems little, 2.5–3 million really matters. Non-revenue vehicle fleet, we're reducing the amount of those vehicles that we have, stuff like that. Every little thing that we're looking at. On ATO deployment, I was actually out overnight, probably about a month ago, on a test train. I could say that night it went really, really well. So I would say we brought basically a peer review to the board, very transparent publicly. Had experts from London, San Francisco, and Atlanta. They all run kind of very similar to us. We are really in a good spot. There's no question about that. Waste, like our trackside signaling to our vehicles, really working well. A couple little small nuances, but that is pretty good. where we're kind of the final piece now is kind of this concept of operations and reintroducing this in a very methodical way that people have the training and procedural stuff down. So we're starting on the red line first. Our goal is to, get that up and running, certainly this year, hopefully not too much longer. Learn from that, make sure it works well, burn it in, if you will, make sure a lot of things get checked out. Then we'd move to probably yellow and green is probably what we would do. And then blue, orange, and silver, just because the multiple lines are a little more complicated that way. But we're working hand in glove with our WMSC partners. I want to thank them. They've been really collaborative with us. We got to get it right. So if it's been off for 14 years. So if we need an extra month, we're going to get it right. But, it's coming along pretty well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Ms.
so
Garvey.
I'll take my turn to say thank you for coming. Thank you for the great presentation. It really was clear. I really appreciate the focus on service because sometimes we get wrapped up in things and oh, right, it's about service. I mean, that's, you can kind of forget when you get wrapped up. So thank you for constantly coming back to that. I appreciate being reminded about the high fixed cost system and what the marginal, utility of cutting things and I think you're probably right. We probably are about the most informed, but you're gonna have to convince people who are not so informed. And if I need that reminder, there are probably some people who don't, or maybe don't even quite understand what marginal fixed cost is. I'm not even saying I could teach it or anything, but I'm just saying it's really important and a lot of people probably have no clue. So anyway, that's because everybody says, well, just cut a little bit and it'll be fine. It doesn't work that. So thank you. An overall question, I ask this all the time in a way, can you put it in context in what's happening elsewhere in the country? I understand we're the only system, right, that doesn't have dedicated stream of revenue, right? We're the only.
Yeah, the only one that truly doesn't have what most of us in the industry would call dedicated.
Dedicated stream, right?
Yeah.
So we need to.
Because not all dedicated means it goes to the agency. Lots of them do, but sometimes dedicated means it goes to a source that has to be for transit, meaning it can't be taken for some other purpose. So we're definitely, trust me, after being here a year, we are the most unique on everything. I promise you that. And one of the things we're trying to do is get us more normal to everyone else, being so high quality, but be more industry norm. I think would be helpful.
Special though,
And we are plenty special.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I also appreciate the focusing on little, like, 2 million here, 3 million there. It sounds fun, but it really will add up. So we sometimes get the feeling that if we had that, dedicated stream, however we get it, that we can count on it, that's kind of like, oh, we're okay. But I think that's not the case. I mean, because all those other places that have this they're having trouble too. Yes, no.
Well, I think, listen,
No,
and this
maybe
we
not.
should probably do as a follow-up deep dive.
Yeah, maybe.
This piece. No,
I
but
know what presentation you have. I was
Yeah, I
looking
can
it
give
up.
you
Yeah, that's fine.
no, but I can give you a quick piece and then you can do follow-up with the group. And I think we're putting a little white paper together on kind of industry. So like New York has dedicated, but not to the full, because again, inflation. I mean, everyone just dealt with this big spike in inflation and then ridership decrease. That was not, even if you had it dedicated, it wasn't thought through that way. But about a month ago, they solved their fiscal crisis and actually they're investing in running more service, more night service, more weekend service. A big deal was reached in Albany and the city, and they're moving all forward and it's all been approved. So significant investments in New York. And actually just yesterday, the governor announced they're going to do a Second Avenue subway extension for billions of dollars. So they want to grow the transit network. California has generally reached an agreement. The governor signed that, I think it was last week, to make sure that San Francisco BART and a few other agencies had all of their funding necessary. And actually the legislature put even more money back into it above what kind of the compromise a little bit was. So that gets them through this crisis. If you look at some of our peers, they are in a little different shape. So the agency I had in Austin is financially, and unless something has changed pretty dramatically, is in good financial shape. It has its own sales tax run by the Transit Authority, has a great reserve policy, multiple months of reserve. Like we don't have a reserve. Very, very bothersome to me. We have an
Yeah,
institution that we don't have a financial reserve. When I was in Austin, we had multi-month in one account and a couple months in another. Great financial management aspect. If you went to LA Metro, they have their own sales tax. They are, from an operating side, pretty good shape. If you went to Atlanta has no fiscal cliff to speak of. They think maybe a 50 by 30, I think it is, that something might go a little array depending. I mean, that's a fair amount of time in government budget planning, 7 years. Because their sales tax has been growing. So as much as inflation has happened in Atlanta area the last 3 years, sales tax the economy has outpaced the inflationary growth. So, and I just use sales tax as an example. I'm not sitting at this meeting saying that's the only solution. But indexing and things of that nature are really important. And I think what I think we need to do is think about indexing revenue source to costs. So if costs go up 5%, a 2% revenue doesn't do it. But at the same time, we should try to incentivize managing the operating budget to actually then drive money into the system. So using every surplus dollar we do in operating, we should think about pay-go capital, put into the capital program to run a more efficient, modernized system, which then makes the system better for everyone long-term and better on the operating side. It doesn't work that way. So if I save $100 million on operating, I can't put it into making the system better from a capital point of view. It goes back to the jurisdictions. So we don't have any process to invest to make the overall efficiency better. So I think that's what we should all think about, is how to structurally think about finances in a different way.
This is really helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a long
No,
answer.
no.
I tend to
No,
talk a lot.
No,
so I
it's
apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just want to follow up before we go. I think, and I'm really appreciating this after the presentation. I know you're trying to keep it high, but clearly being able to dive and understand those
I
details.
mean, it's for us
Yeah.
to talk to our people.
I assume we're gonna have a lot of more conversations over the next year.
You're invited any month you'd like. Sorry, Commissioner Faust, yes.
Just make it perfectly clear, Metro is not taking the lead on solving this problem. You've taken the lead on identifying the problem. You are looking to the jurisdiction to solve, so that we're not looking to you, and then all of a sudden we find out you were looking at us.
Well, I guess I'll let you, my first thing I would say is this, I would say, we don't have any tools. All I have is cutting. I don't have, we don't have any taxing authority or revenue generation. So either our partners invest in the system or we cut, the way the model is today. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, it's just that's the model.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think what we can do, and I don't know if we want to, I think it's okay to talk a little bit about the financial model we've developed to help our partners.
Yeah.
You know, we've developed a financial model with an incredible number of variations that incorporates DC, Maryland, and Virginia and our specific revenue streams, demographics, and all that stuff to assist others in scenario planning and helping to develop the model. I think you're right in saying, we're not gonna come out and say, you gotta do this and you have to do this and you need a sales tax and because that's not really our role.
I'm not saying that you would say.
Yeah, right.
Do this. I'm asking,
Right.
Are you gonna come to us and say, will you do this? And you're not, you're
I
saying.
think we, at least the way I look at it is, we need our jurisdictional partners, our state delegation, our business community to do the part about the solution set. And then we're here to say what's gonna work and what's not gonna work and how it, how that would actually impact our system. And certainly we can help guide the conversation, but.
And super
you know,
collaborative, like we want
Yeah.
to, what I think what we're trying to accomplish is not waiting to the last minute. We are trying to be early in this process and being very transparent to say, here's the problem statement. We are willing to work with anyone or anybody that wants to collaborate. And so obviously we have ideas. The thing that I think we have to keep coming back to is this predictability and sustainability. Those two words, I think, matter a lot for Metro. What that instrument is to get to predictability and sustainability of a source is probably more of a political nature conversation that I assume we'll have tons of conversations about, but ultimately you have different powers and roles than we would have.
Right. No, and, yeah, I really appreciate what you just said. But you know, waiting till the last minute, we are, I think, in terms of, a legislature that we have to get things to and get them on board very quickly, as the chairman pointed out. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I just want, one nitpick.
Sure.
The 200 million that you say is result of, giving the jurisdictions a break. Now, if we were to repay that 200 million, it would still show up as part of the deficit next year and going forward, right? So aren't you mixing one-time money with, a recurring? Or will next year the deficit be, 550 million instead of
Exactly,
700.
exactly, Commissioner. So all we're saying is, the driver of the 750 is made up of these sources. Clearly that, I would say it's one time in the sense, if $200 million from the jurisdictions came back in, it'd be one time. It was cumulative in the sense of the 3% escalation multiple years. It just created a little bit of a lower base that gets that growth margin. But I think we just want to be very honest and transparent of how the parts and pieces came together. I wasn't here at the time, so I'm just doing my best to summarize how that came together.
And just final question, the ask is that we consider the capital budget as we go through solving the operating, or that, are you looking for
Yes,
a solution?
I'm probably saying something more than other people want me to be that aggressive, but yes, because otherwise in 2 years, we're back here having the exact same conversation. And it puts the onus on us and the board to say, how are we gonna manage our capital program without any certainty the next year after that? So, and part of it is, we don't need that much more probably on the capital side to then keep the bonding going, to push it out maybe another decade, right? So, part of what my thought process, and again, I don't have to vote on this at the end, but if you're gonna pull the Band-Aid, 90% it's off, maybe it makes sense to get that extra 10% because you don't then go back 2 years later and pull the whole Band-Aid again. So, that's ultimately gonna be more of a political calculation, but I think the decoupling has actually hurt us from running the organization from an overall efficiency point of view to some extent. So I'm looking at it from a management point of view, not necessarily a political point of view.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thank you, and I know that you're the main show tonight. We do have a few things coming up. I just want to let my commissioners know we're getting close to 8:20, so do let me know if you raise your hands if you have questions, and I'll make sure to go around and just asking everyone to, let's be mindful so we all get our questions in.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead,
Thank
Commissioner.
you very much. Very informative. I guess I just want to go back to the expense side of the ledger. What more can we possibly do on the expense side, which is just as structural as the funding side? And what can the NVTC do now?
The second part, I'd have to think through about what the NVTC particularly could do. We have upcoming CBA negotiations. That's obviously not part of this puzzle, right? Again, I believe we have a great workforce that's working very hard. I'm pretty proud of what they've been doing. At the same time, we have to manage costs. We're managing vacancies on the non-representative side. Long-term, energy management is a big deal for us as an organization. Probably, I guess, soon the biggest energy user, I think, in the region. We're going to become even a much bigger energy user when we go to, zero emission electric buses. Maybe there's a way we could work on big cost savings on energy supply that could result in lower costs for Metro that way. And maybe that's something that politically could be worked with the utilities in some extent, or for credits or some other way, So that's just off the cuff thinking. The big drivers are labor, energy, commodities. At the end of the day, there's only, rubber tires isn't going to change the budget that much. But it's a great question that I think we'll come back with to say, are there things that you can further help? I will say, I think we have to have a big conversation as a region, not Metro. We could be more efficient as a region delivering transit, not just Metro. We have a lot of bus operators. We are not maximizing every dollar delivering bus transportation or rail transportation in this region. We don't have integrated ticketing. We don't have an integrated fare policy. We don't have integrated bus stops and signage and shelters. Multiple people buy their own buses. We should be buying universal buses for everyone in the region, dropping engineering costs, maintenance costs. We should have standards on all of those things. We should be thinking through training academies, just like police in regions do, where not everyone has their own thing. That could go a long way, I think, to actually managing our overall transit funding structure and cost structure as a region, whether it's Metro or other partners. So I think, that we should be thinking more about regional integration.
Thank you.
I'm gonna turn it over, but if I can skip over for a minute, because you touched on something I think many of us are pretty passionate about, and that's bus systems. And so I do want to make sure that we understand that what some of that would mean. That yes, I think we all want the best service possible. And I think that means here regionally in Virginia, there are reasons and historical reasons why we have our own bus systems in addition to the Metro bus. And I think there are some questions and concerns and making sure we're all doing these bus studies and absolutely, I think first, something we want to make sure is done well, especially as we go into more bus rapid transit systems and all that. So let me pause for a minute if that's okay, unless you want to do the bus question, James.
I don't know.
But I know some people have questions about buses since we're on that. Is that okay if I just? Yeah, so Kenny, if you want to go ahead, because I think bus is a big one that has come up and there are some questions around it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, Randy, first, thank you for being here. Lots of major accomplishments. Really appreciate that slide that you put up to show. I think it's important to give this to the entire region to say that we're going in the right direction with WMATA. There's no argument as to the need and the benefit. Still some challenges, but specifically when we're talking about bus, and I think Alexandria is a really good example. We have a very, very solid bus system, as well as paratransit. And, just bluntly, when we're looking at WMATA bus service, we're paying more and getting less. And that's a lot of Northern Virginia. So while grateful for the supplemental buses that we get, in Alexandria, 28A, 10A, 10B, 29KN, I could go on, the 11Y. Our buses, at least in Alexandria, they're clean, they're on time, we're paying less money, we're having good coverage, great service. So when we talk about the subsidies from the jurisdiction, this is a pretty major issue. And none of us in this room are taking for granted what that subsidy means and the need for the system as a whole. But again, like I said, when we're looking at it from the point of we're getting less service, but having to pay more, how do we start to kind of remedy that when we're looking at this overall calculus?
Yeah, I think we should have a deep conversation about that. I'm not sure the premise of your statement is fully accurate, the way I would, be here about a year. The way Metro really works from a regional formula is that all the jurisdictions are paying in to spread the cost. And so in theory, the more local service you are delivering, the more you are not availing yourself of sharing the cost. So by investing in more local service, you are carrying the load 100% by yourself versus being in the formula, spreading the cost. Other jurisdictions, I think, have decided to spread that, use the regional formula to spread that in a different way than maybe parts of Northern Virginia.
What jurisdiction, do you mean Maryland?
Sure, or DC.
I mean, DC, that's the only bus system they have.
Well, they got circulator.
I mean, I think that's, come on, circulator's got 4 routes.
He means what other jurisdictions have combined in the way that you were just suggesting.
Well, like again, if you went to, I would say DC, parts of Maryland, they are understanding that it's a spread load through the funding. So my premise earlier was that we are spending a lot of money. I mean, just be straight up, we are inefficient in how we operate bus service because we have a lot of cost structure being driven by a lot of siloing operating. It's just factual. It's not Metro or someone else. Some agencies buy buses with us, some don't. There's huge costs of these kinds of things. We don't have uniform bus standards. We don't have uniform maintenance standards. We don't have a bus stop. Half of our region, you can't even tell which bus stop you're at. We don't do good integration between services that are showing up. I mean, I see Rich here for BRE. The fact that a customer may get off a BRE train at Crystal City and have to go across the hall to get on our service and use a different kind of ticket and fare to go to the airport in 2023, that doesn't make any sense. Let alone a MARC train and on we have enormous room for opportunity to create a much better regional transit network that is not about who runs something, but the only mission should be to get more people on transit, period.
Well, I guess we'll agree to disagree a little bit on that one because, we're getting a ton of people on our transit in Alexandria. And we're, I think we pay something like $60 less, maybe, or 40 less for Revolution for our routes as well.
So I do that, and I think you're right. I think we want to definitely come back to this. I think there's a big discussion, and I think what you're getting at, and something you said, Randy, is in the end, it doesn't matter who's running it. We want to make sure that we're providing the best, smoothest service, and
Get as many people as possible on transit.
hopefully we can
period.
get there. Yeah, I think we're all trying to study that. We've been studying for a while. Several groups have been studying it here in Northern Virginia, and I think we're excited that Metro is really interested in it. I think there's some caution, right? Some fear about what that might mean, because we all want to make sure that those are the best.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me go to Walter and then I'll come back over to James. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. And Craig, I think you made a good point there. I mean, certainly the Fairfax connector, we can run it at less cost than MetroBus as well. And I think that's true for a lot of our jurisdictions. So something longer term, you know, I think to look at it. And the discussion on the subsidy credit, it reminds me a little bit of the situation that we had with our employees in each of our jurisdictions. I mean, we froze salaries for 1 year. I think we gave a 1% raise for the next year. So, you know, I hear our employees counting in the, you know, chirping in the background. Well, yeah, Metro didn't get the increase, but we didn't get it either. So it was an interesting time. And certainly I think we're growing out of it. Randy, you're doing a fantastic job. This is really, really helpful. I think this is a hard discussion for us to have. I think it's really important that we do have it. My question is, we know the 750 estimate, top line, looking at, we've been talking about MetroBus a little bit, but looking at different modes, how much of that is attributable, or do you know how much is attributable to the different modes, Metro Rail versus MetroBus, Metro Access? Is it mostly Metro Rail that's driving it, or have you looked at it that way?
We don't look at it that way because we have a service plan we have to deliver, and this is what it costs to deliver that service.
So what about for Loudon who doesn't get MetroBus? How much, I mean, is it a proportionate deficit?
Well, that's different. That is different than how we build a budget versus different how it's allocation. So allocation, Loudon has a specific piece of a formula because of the service they get versus other jurisdictions get different types of services.
Well, we don't pay bus subsidy, we don't pay rent.
Right, and in Fairfax, 60% of our bus service is connector, 40% is MetroBus. So we are paying MetroBus. And that's one of the reasons I'm asking is, but you're not looking at it in terms of the budget deficit, if it's being driven more by one mode than another.
No, because it's not about mode. It's the operation of the organization, and that's the deficit to deliver the service levels that we just have today, let alone as a region, we want more bus service. We're going through about our best network redesign right now. We have parts of the service that we deliver in, say, Fairfax, where we deliver service Monday to Friday and we don't deliver weekend service. And people want weekend service. So that's even more money than talking about closing the deficit. So the deficit is based on this year's service plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, let's come back over to James.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Just going back to Chairman McKay's first question about the share, and I think you're making the right decision not to get into the numbers. I will say that in 2018, in the dedicated funding agreement, I think Virginia's portion came out to about 30%, 31%, and that's pre-Silverline, right? So it's reasonable to assume similar formula would lead to something in that 1/3.
I think that's a
range. Right?
general good understanding.
Yeah. So just for all of us orienting ourselves,
Yeah.
that's probably roughly what we're talking about. Have you talked directly to Governor Young?
I have not talked to Governor.
Have you talked to Governor Moore?
I have not talked to Governor Moore directly.
You've talked to the
I
mayor?
mean, I should say, I've had conversations with Governor Moore, but not about this presentation.
I mean, just speaking from the Virginia perspective and the, not waiting until the last minute, I think it's really important to have that early conversation with Governor Youngkin. If you look at the last two successes, somewhat unpredictable successes for Metro funding in Virginia. In 2013, Governor McDonald stuck his neck out, to his credit, and got it across the finish line. 2017, 2018, Governor McAuliffe and Northam did the same. This doesn't get solved if Governor Youngkin doesn't stick his neck out the way those previous governors did. And if we aren't having direct conversations with them, the way you're having direct conversations with us now, it's not going to happen. So I think that's a really important conversation for you and Paul to have as soon as possible.
Yeah, I guess I'll take a step back in the sense of, I want to be clear that we were having a fair amount of conversation with Secretary Miller. So it's not that we're not having conversations with the Youngkin administration. Secretary Miller, Director Buell is down at the end of the table. We've had many conversations. We've been down in Richmond, both Board Member Letourneau and Chair Smedberg. We've been down in Richmond meeting with senior leadership, bipartisan senior leadership on bipartisan approach there. I think we have some follow-up stuff in the fall. I think CTV is being meeting in, I think it's early October up in Northern Virginia. We're engaged in that conversation. So it's not that I want to be clear. It's
no,
not that there's any
and-
conversations. Yeah.
Yep, I have incredible respect for Secretary Miller and even more incredible respect for Director McRule, but this rises to a level that there needs to be a direct conversation with the governor as soon as possible to get him invested in finding a solution here. That's, I'll show them. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Sounds good. Let me, Commissioner Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for just blurting out my questions during your presentation with over exuberance, but it was a great presentation. I forgot we were in a parliamentary meeting there. I want to echo what James said and what Deborah Kay said. Do I have this correct that roughly the revenue clip is about roughly a third due to pandemic ridership drop off, a third due to inflation and CBA combination, and a third due to reduced regional subsidies?
I wouldn't call it a third. I'd say, slide 11 gives it pretty exact, 26% subsidy credit, 38% decreased revenue pandemic, or 36% collective bargaining inflation. So again, and these aren't like down to the exact cent. We're trying to give, this range of.
Well, the reason that jumped out at me is because from everything you say, all the indications are, to me, I'm fairly confident we're going to get back to pre-pandemic ridership. I think we are. I think all the changes that you've implemented are fantastic. I think we all have a responsibility to advertise it to our populations, our constituents. Metro's back, and it's a great system. It's making great strides. Inflation and collective bargaining agreements are either A, out of our control, or B, contractual and largely locked in and baked in. It's going to come down to increased regional subsidies. I mean, that's the only variable that I can see that we have any significant control over in this formula going forward. It just is. And to Chair McKay's point, and to James's point, the sooner we start having those really painful discussions, the better, because it's going to come down to that. Everything else is kind of eyewash. It's just not going to move the needle the way the increased regional subsidies or federal government, direct federal government support to operating budget. And in this political climate, I just don't know how realistic that is. But it's going to come down to the subsidy discussion, and the sooner the better. Let's start figuring it out. I agree. I don't know where we're going to get that money, but we got to start having that conversation. Thank you.
And I think we're hearing a lot of, we need to all do it together, collaboratively figuring that out. So, yes, Commissioner McPike.
Acting.
Acting, alternate.
So, I mean, 31%, if that's Virginia's share, $750 million is 200 something million. These are, state governments that are seeing their own federal subsidies related to the pandemic decline. So my question is, what conversations are you having with the federal government about this and the Biden administration to bring money from the people that can actually print it to some of these questions? Because this is I don't know if this is a challenge that we have the scale to handle in 12 months.
Yeah, so we've had just recently, the chair and I had a great discussion with our Senate delegation. We've had ongoing conversation. Regina's in contact with our congressional delegation staff, if not daily, on a variety of topics, but this is obviously very, very high up. We've been pretty engaged. I think we've got to be a little pragmatic. We brought some, maybe what I think is some creative ideas to our delegation to think through. Obviously, it's very hard for them to help Metro without helping other transit agencies, right? I mean, it's the way our country kind of works to some extent, but that's right or wrong. So I want to be, eyes wide open that it's a very, very hard road ahead and the federal government gave us an enormous amount of money over the last 3 years, just like states and localities and others. There's talk of rescissions at Congress, right? I mean, I think that's catching people a little off guard. There's people in Congress that want to rescind authorized funding to help balance budgets. So it's an environment that doesn't really set up well for more funding. With that said, it doesn't mean we're not going to keep fighting for it. I think we have a great delegation. They really care about Metro. They all want to help. but they don't have necessarily, they don't control all the levers of power to make something. Working with the administration on, we're doing everything we can to show that we are there when federal workers locally are visiting federal workers, want to be back to the office. And if they're doing 2 days a week, they want to do 3 or 4. We have the capacity and the frequency on bus and rail to handle them. And we're making that real crystal clear to everyone. We are not impediment to getting people back to the office. I think it's fair to say last year we were an impediment for a lot of people to get back to the office because of the level of service we were running. We are not now. We're going to keep doing everything creative and trying to be getting our federal partner, but I also am trying to be eyes wide open and pragmatic. Reality on the ground.
I think that's right. I also think that, from my perspective, the House appropriations process in DC is going to fail this year, which means the Senate might play a bigger role than it normally does. Of these, which could actually be helpful for this issue in this region.
Yeah, above my pay grade on that question, I think.
Any other questions over here? Yeah.
I just want to not really ask a question, but more so make a statement. Randy, I just want to, I really appreciate how much time you've spent in Richmond working with myself and with the secretary. That's really gone a long way from my perspective. I do want to emphasize that Virginia is very different. We are not Maryland. We are not DC. We have the largest transit and rail program that we've ever had in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have the largest transportation program we've ever had in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So as we walk forward with whatever the ask is going to be into a legislative session that's going to have the most change in, I've heard as going back as far as Reconstruction, the landscape it's different. And Virginia is going to act different and need to be handled different than Maryland or the district. I think when you start talking about local bus systems and you talk about efficiencies, we've done a lot of that through code and through partnerships on the Virginia side. We buy our buses together. We buy our bus shelters together. We already do a lot of that. And so sometimes the message that you deliver to a Maryland or a DC may not resonate as well with Virginia because the landscape. We need to focus on the problem that we need to solve. And I guess I come at it from being part of the 2017, 2018 discussions about capital. I know what went into that. That was not a 6-month conversation. That was an 18-month conversation based on data that everybody bought into and was part of and came along together. And I put that out there to say I've been through it. We are behind the 8 ball and the road ahead is not easy. There you go. Don't have to answer that.
I agree. It'll take all of us to come together for sure.
Yes, let me see a couple who haven't gone yet. Let me go to Commissioner Ferranti with other questions there, and I'll come back to Panic. Or is there anyone else over there I didn't get to? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I think about 16, 18 months ago, where we were in this conversation with and where we are today, and you have done amazing stuff. You exceeded expectations even after I left Austin and public transportation was paying in 2008, and you did incredible things here. In addition, just points, this slide on the pie slide, 26, 38, and 36%. Part of that is jurisdictional subsidy credit. So we have to own that, and we have to take some of the political responsibility as I see it. Legally, I don't know that we can take all of it. We cannot, is my current impression. But we still would want to own some of that. I still feel that the distance between, I agree with your point about Title VI, and you don't want to go into scenarios of cutting service, but the distance between this slide, the pie slide, and the next slide, what I'm missing there is for those who are not informed, who are not in the 84% approval of rail, they still think Metro is broken. And so, your next year's budget savings on the call center consolidation, some more things like that help quantify and show the personal responsibility in addition to the society, the regional responsibility we need to. That seems like the next communication step is to put some things in there that are part of the way between those two slides. And I think a lot more people will hear us if we add that. That's kind of the big thought that I had and really ready to dig in and work on this. I do also feel it needs to be said that the elegant solution that is the capital funding, we have to make it to fiscal year 27. We have to make it 2 or 3 years, in my opinion. And the regional sales tax is beyond what I think is likely. I don't disagree with that we need to engage business community and all of us with the governor, but the short term is what still good to lay out the problem, but I don't think we're going to get to the elegant solution because of what Director DeBrule just said in the 18 months and the different tectonics of where we are compared to 2013 and 2017, 18. And that doesn't mean not raise it, but we need to be nimble to get to what the real constraints are in the short term.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The only comment I really appreciate comment would be, we're working on a group of like, if there were white papers. So all these like subtopics that we can then go, okay, here's a 2 or 5 pager on that. There's 2 by bit. So building a compendium of like really good information across a variety of topics that can then answer all these different types of questions. So it can be used by a variety of people in different contexts, because it's so hard to give a monolithic explanation to just a complete different level of understanding to someone that may use the system every day, to never use the system, to some people think it's amazing, some think it's messed up. The only last comment is, the good thing is, Metro is like every other transit in America. No matter how well you do, overwhelmingly, there's a bunch of people that still think it's messed up. So whatever city you were in, everyone loves to hate on the transit system. It's just kind of a universal joke in our industry. But yeah, your point is really to the fact that we have to get a lot of people that don't use the system to understand the value of the system and how Metro is trying to manage every dollar like a personal dollar. Couldn't agree more.
And we have it, so the board has a slide deck that's a version of this that's about 58 slides. So, and then there's another slide deck that we haven't even done yet. That's another 40 or 50. There are a bunch of slides about the savings stuff that didn't make it into this presentation tonight. They were though in the board meeting presentation last week on savings specifically, because the board was like, yes, we got to talk about what we're doing to save money.
Yep.
It can't just be we're asking people for money. We have to show that we are putting skin in the game with this. So you're totally right.
Thank you. And let me go to Panic. Got one more. Before I do that though, and just because you mentioned all these handouts, and I think hearing what was said and hearing what Jennifer DeBrule said, I think it really is critical. You have this awesome slide, and I hope what you're looking at, I think you probably had the staff with our staff is, and this is very complex, and some of us want to have the full deck. I think you have to be very thoughtful and cautious about what's in those handouts when people are in, hopefully before session, after session. What does it mean for the Commonwealth? What does it mean for each of our jurisdictions? What does it mean that's going to be really different in DC and Maryland, both in the service and the structural ways to fix it, and just in the way we're set up, and what's going to work better for us. And I think that the point of we need to get to next year, and then I know it doesn't help for someone who's trying to manage multi-year organization, but like was said, we have to figure out the Band-Aid first, maybe.
Yeah, my only grounding on this, and I think we just all have to be eyes wide open, is one thing I think we have to try to avoid is solving next year, and the year after that happens to be, make it up, 150 million, and someone says, okay, well, we did the lift last year, Metro solved that. Because Metro can't solve that next year either. So I just want to, I'm going to say that every single time we have this conversation, that there is no solving next year, and then Metro solves the corresponding years after. There's only so much we can do that is not service. And I'm not suggesting you didn't say that, but I think it's important that we remind everyone, we don't have a 1-year issue, we have a forever issue, just like you have with police and fire, county employees, and on and on and on.
Yes, Panic.
So 100% agree with what you just said, and to that point, I wanted to build off of what Mr. Brule has said, and several others have echoed, Mr. Walkinshaw, Mr. McKay, and Mr. Ferranti. So, when we're going down to Richmond to not only lobby our own delegation, but potentially go lobby other folks from Tidewater, from Richmond, I mean, they don't necessarily care about it, right? So we have to make that argument. And if they say, well, you guys are getting less service and paying more, so what's the point, you know, shift that money around. So we have to really work at it to show not only how it's an economic engine for the region, but also for the Commonwealth. So, you know, we're trying to do that part, but we need some help with that because again, like there are folks that actively want to just completely defund Obama, right? Even at the federal level that people are going after PREA. And, you know, that's why I'm glad that we have the federal delegation that we do because they're fighting to make sure that we keep it. But yeah, I just driving that point home a little bit more that there needs to be a little bit of acknowledgement when it comes to Virginia, because again, we have a lot of bus systems of our own routes. DC, there's 4 routes for the connector. Maryland, we don't have enough routes either. So we have to figure out how to paint that picture down in Richmond.
You can I get packets and then we are gonna close up for tonight because we had to have a couple more presentations. Let Randy go, you know, relax out on the metro. His happy place.
Just right around all night.
Typing all night.
Very short. I actually relax by riding metro now because it's a far more relaxing way to get around and for finally we can get around with metro. So thank you for that. So this is actually a good segue from Kanek's remarks. So the businesses, I mean, you know, we talk about talking to the governor, we talk about going to the rest of the administration, to the federal government, and we have one major stakeholder here. This is who actually represents these 1.7 million jobs, right? The business. This is Metro is indeed an economic engine, definitely an economic engine for the Commonwealth, not only for us, but we are not the actual representative of that. How do we engage businesses? Now, do you or what would be our, you know, potential part of our tasks to do that as we look at what I understand is a 2-level discussion here. One is the Band-Aid, so the short-term solution, because nothing structural will happen anytime soon to address the financial problem next year, basically. And the second is the structural discussion. So where are the businesses?
Yeah, I'll defer to you and other expertise if it doesn't happen in a year. I mean, that's not my purview. I do think we should work to try to make that happen and not acknowledge that it can't off the start. My advice, for lack of better, would be to not self-compromise on that, but neither here nor there. The business community we're heavily engaged with. So locally, you know, I was actually had a conversation today, you know, Greater Washington Partnership, I think is really critically important. Board of Trade, Federal City Council, Nova Chamber. We were out, I see Jason's still here. No, he left. Jason's group last week, which is the Northern Virginia Alliance. I was with the National Lending Bid 2 weeks ago, and the Arlington Chamber, the Loudoun Chamber, Montgomery Chamber. Some things, I guess, whatever chambers are left. Yeah, so we're engaged, but yeah, I mean, I think all of us need to do this. There's no, like, I don't know how to, there's no Randy Clark talking to everyone to solve this problem. I've been here 1.5 months, right? At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is run the system really, really well. And that's the number one thing we can do to bring trust and confidence that it's worth investing in long-term. We're going to keep having all these conversations. I will welcome any and all opportunities anyone in this room has to say, hey, like if someone come up and said, hey, Randy, would you and the team talk with this person? This person's really important. They're going to play a big role here. And I don't know them. Oh my God, love to. You get a group of people together and you want to have a conversation, we'll do that. But yeah, we need our business community to get unified together and start speaking about the urgency of this. And again, that's why we brought this topic up. We need everyone to start getting, you know, people are already saying we're already behind the 8 ball. Well, then we need some sense of urgency coming out of, especially Labor Day. I mean, August is pretty quiet around here. Like coming out of Labor Day, we need people to say, this is the topic for the year and not, well, we'll deal with it in November, we'll deal with it in January. We need people to really jump into this thing pretty heavy.
Well, Randy, I want to thank you. And on that, I love that on slide 7, bullet number 2, you've got in my district, the McLean Station. So excited, speaking of business, to see Capital One, they're all going to the purge. But I think that's a really good point, and we're all here and appreciate the work you and your team are doing to meet with all the stakeholders, especially here in Virginia, especially with our public and private partners and stakeholders, because like I think everyone has said, and Paul, I think is still on the line, we're only going to do this together. And so thank you for being the cheerleader. In addition to manager for Metro, I think I speak for our colleagues here. We want it to be successful. We want to ensure the best quality, best service, best safety for our riders and our employees. And thank you. And it's going to be a few months ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you for all having me again, over your time and attention to this matter. Look forward to many ongoing discussions both here and individually. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Randy.
Have a good evening.
I know we are a little bit behind schedule, but I think that was a really important conversation. Next up, we do have, I think, a very brief report from our Ramada Committee Chair. No report. Perfect.
Just had it.
Oh, so you correct. Just a reminder.
I should stay for that.
Next Ramada Committee meeting, you are invited, Randy. It's July 20th at 6 p.m.
Could I just note
Yes.
before Randy leaves?
Randy, one last thing.
Falls Church is the smallest metro compact jurisdiction, so don't forget us.
Never. And if you'd like to be on the system, we'll come and join. Yeah.
Thanks, Randy. So now we will turn it over to our zero and reduced fare policy. We heard a little bit already today about this, but at Northern Virginia National Perspective, as you recall, back in 2021, many of our transit systems were struggling to see how to address equity and access to their systems, and many in the region explored providing zero and reduced bus fares in different amounts. Hopefully you've also seen the presentation. A lot has happened since then, so we've asked our staff, and are they here? To come back and report on the status of our zero.
I'm gonna be.
Oh,
half
Kate's
the
gonna
staff
do it.
Make it, yeah.
And our zero and reduced
We'll
fare
go for
efforts, we do have Kate and Josh Baker, I think
Josh Baker. yes,
is with us here now. That's just general manager. If you wanna, come up here, Josh, we're very excited.
Not to sit in Randy's seat, do I?
No, that's what I have to. You can sit there. There you go, the staff seat. So Kate, if you wanna take it away.
No, thank you so much. And again, as we were talking about 2 years ago, which like blows me away, that was 2 years ago, we did provide a policy paper to the commission to really give some thoughts to all the jurisdictions about what are the things you may want to look at when you're talking about potential of eliminating transit fares. And really at that time, we had 2 local bus systems who were contemplating it. And others were weighing the pros and cons. And so what I wanted to do was sort of see where we are as a region now, talk a tiny little bit about what's going on nationally, which you'll be not surprised to see is not unlike what we see in our locality. And then obviously get an opportunity for Josh to talk about the experience in Dash. So just flip to the next slide. So what we've got, there we go, just sort of characterizing overall within the region, what we have is that we do have 2 systems that have gone fare free, Dash in Alexandria and Q in the city of Fairfax. But we've also found that others have tailored their fare approaches really based upon policy priorities with a whole range of different discounts, whether it be for students, low income, elderly, those with disabilities. And in some instances, some have had fare free for local routes as compared to sort of commuter routes. And really, this is a microcosm of what's happening nationwide. And so it's one of those things, I guess you could say it's a tale of many policies, not just of one. And what really comes down to it is the ability to provide flexibility within localities. One of the things that's been made possible for our systems to do a lot of these innovative programs, and I realize the director will just stepped out, but I was going to give a shout out to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation program, because they have the TRIP program that's providing grants to be able to make those things happen. So go to the next slide, please. So when we talk about what's happening nationwide, and I actually had an opportunity to be out and meet with transit executives from around the country, specifically talking about this issue. I actually moderated a debate and it had about 70 people in the room, 70 transit GMs in the room. And it really does come down to the policy considerations, whether it be looking at issues of equity and coverage, but also the dynamics of making sure what are the considerations financially and to your service if you are looking at loss of some of those revenues. So again, we're talking about access and equity, operations, operator safety, finances, and of course, community aspects. Next slide. And so for transit agencies that did put in zero fares within the past few years, there still are questions about long-term viability. Now, granted, different systems have different recovery ratios from their fare box. So we do know that bus systems typically, the fare that is coming in is not necessarily even close to a majority. It's usually a small part of it, but it is a revenue that has to be replaced in some way. So obviously having the financial commitment from a locality to fill in that gap is an important consideration. But the other things we sort of, as you look to the media or whatever out there, is a concern and perception that you don't want to see service degraded because you've moved to fare free. So again, that financial commitment doesn't go because you've gone fare free. You need to make sure that those services happen. So again, the fear of long-term financial viability, again, comes in whether it's a lack of dedicated funding, or even the perception that the money would be better spent on actually improving service versus taking it away. And so next slide, which should be my last one. So again, just like we're seeing here in Northern Virginia, elsewhere in the countries, agencies are looking to different approaches that may actually yield the same benefits of ridership and some equity incentives. So as I mentioned, a number of our localities are looking at low income. Randy was talking about the new LIFT program. Other ways to sort of increase that access for students and otherwise. Another thing that's happening, and I know we're doing a little bit that here with VRE, is offering sort of individual days of fare free or other things. Over in Denver, they're actually doing sort of a fare free summer for air quality. And finally, the other thing I think that's an interesting twist that would be fantastic to be exploring more, I think, in this area is the idea that what they're doing in Philadelphia, which is a very strong push for employers as a part of their employment package, is providing a transit pass to their employees, 100% coverage. And so we obviously have that very active with the federal benefits. I know there are some companies and they obviously get rewarded, by trade associations and others for what they're doing, but the opportunity to be looking at those universal fare passes as an employee benefit is definitely something that could add to that conversation about subsidized fare payment as compared to going to zero fares for everybody. So obviously lots of different stories around the country, just sort of getting you up to speed. Josh, obviously at Dash has been living this for almost 2 years. So he's going to showcase some of the exciting things that are going on at Dash in their approach to this.
Good.
See, I'm trying to keep it succinct.
Thank you. Well, I'll just use the moment while they're getting the slides pulled up to say thank you for having me back and for adjusting your meeting schedule to my vacation schedule, because last year when I presented, I was on vacation and I had to come on Zoom. So it was really nice of you to accommodate that. I'm just joking here. But I will say thanks to the commission and for all that you do to support transit. It really means a lot. And while I have the floor to say that Virginia does it best. Just leave that out there. All respect to my friends and colleagues. Anyway, talking about fare free. So the first slide here, it's put away. I just wanted to kind of recap for you a little bit what's going on with our fare free program. And Kate, I think you did an excellent job introducing what's been happening with Dash. So we did eliminate fares entirely throughout the entire system. And I think I spoke with you about that a little over a year ago. We did receive one of the TRIP grants, which was an excellent opportunity to help us sort of get over the hump, so to say. One thing I will note about TRIP is that it's a step down program. So it's over 4 years with each year dropping down. I don't have those percentages in here, but in year 4, we have to be fare free. And I think that's a really smart part of TRIP. It's a really important way to incentivize us if you're gonna go after TRIP, if you're gonna think about using that program, to understand that that's the kind of commitment and what that means. We established a framework which is posted on our website, dashbus.com, and I think may have sent to some of you after the last time we talked, that really talks about what is the process as we continue to be fare free, what are the sort of point of no returns? And I think that that's a really important thing to talk about here as you think about fare free is, yeah, what's the long-term viability of it? But also, how hard is it if you need to change course? What does it take to turn that ship? And it gets harder and harder each year. And there are some real factors to think about. I won't go into that in detail. I'm happy to answer questions, but that's the things we address in our framework, everything from the capital equipment, the services that we have that we were paying for fare collection and money counting and those kinds of things. We also looked at establishing metrics to understand over the period of time, both of being fare free and in the future, what's the feedback we're getting? What is the response that we're seeing from the ridership? What is the important priorities for them? And how do we make sure we're checking in to understand within the community, how is this program affecting them? So we established a lot of that in the program. On the next slide, talk a little bit about some of the successes and challenges in the program. First of all, hands down, this has been incredible for us. We are looking at celebrating the highest ridership in the history of Dash in the coming year. That's substantial. 4.5 million rides is more than Dash has ever transported in a single year since it started almost 40 years ago. So that's something to really reflect on. And this is post-pandemic. We recognize that just as you had a long conversation about Metro and Metro Rail in particular, Dash was a very heavy service being used to get to Metro Rail and from Metro Rail. Well, Metro Rail ridership is still down, but our ridership is sky high. So those people that were going to rail, we're hoping are still using Dash and moving around the community, but we're doing even more, even though those folks aren't riding necessarily. We have noticed that there have been substantial ridership increases middays, evenings, and weekends. There's two pieces to that. Obviously, we did fare free, but we also tweaked our system. We have the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan and the new Dash network, and we've really done a lot of work to make sure the service is where people need it, when they need it, and a frequency they can use. Still a lot of work to go on that, but that has had a big impact on that as well. This was successful in limiting fare disputes, one of the biggest issues for us. An area that was a constant conflict for us between bus operators and riders. So that we consider success. We also have noticed that it has reduced the dwell time at stops. We are now able to take advantage of front and rear door boarding. So all door boarding and alighting at all stops throughout the entire system. And the customers have adapted to that. You sit at the King Street Metro station, you will notice that they will line up at the front door for a Metro bus, but when a Dash bus pulls up, both doors open up and they're lined up at both doors. They're getting on and off as fast as they can. So we see that as a great success. What are some of the challenges? Well, we're seeing overcrowding. That's a good problem to have, but it does reflect sometimes on the service quality for people. Folks don't really like to be sardined on a bus, although I started my career as driving a bus in college, and college students loved it. Folks going to work, not so much. So we need to address that, and we're looking at that in our capital programs. We have noticed a slight increase in loitering. That's to be expected. We knew that from other systems that have done this around the country. It is not so substantial that we consider it something that would cause us not to talk about doing in the future. I just want to put that out there. I think it's a challenge, but I think it's overcome. We have noticed an increase in driver assaults, but I would say something to think about here is that this is a problem everywhere. This isn't unique, I think, just to Dash, and I don't think that this is as a result of something having to do with fare free, although there is a correlation that there are more people on transit. When you have more people, you have more opportunity for incidents. And we also have a lot of kids riding, a lot of middle and high school kids. And I don't know what you all were like in middle and high school, but I know I was a little bit of a terror. My mom reminded me of that this evening when we had dinner. And then a slight increase in trash, litter, and vandalism. We pride ourselves in having very clean buses that would go out at the beginning of the day and come back just as clean as when they left. Well, that's not so much the case anymore. So we've made some tweaks to our cleaning processes to make sure that we address the effects. But again, that could be because of increased ridership. So the next slide here gives you a visual representation of the impacts of ridership. I call this the skyscraper chart. Ignore all the busyness. If you want the details, they're there for you, but essentially those skyscrapers in the back are everything that happened in the past, particularly pre-pandemic. The red line, as well as the dark gray, and then the green lines are all reflecting what happened during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. Most notably, you see there in September, where it says new network and free fares. You notice the trajectory of the green lines, skipping Omicron in January, and then heading into the current fiscal year where you see the blue line, which has consistently outperformed any other year in history. Any other month in history, excuse me. On the next slide, we talk about our customer survey results. One of the commitments we made in our Fare Free framework, which is a bit of a mouthful, is that we're going to continue to talk to our customers, not only about Dash services as we always do, but to get a better understanding of why are they using Dash more if they are using it more than they had before. And does it have to do with free fares? Does it have to do with investments in the new Dash network? And what are the correlations? We do know that 71% of riders responding indicated they are riding Dash more because it's free. And that is 80% among the low income respondents. So substantial impacts there on our low income riders at the benefit here. 22% of riders are new to Dash in the last year. We consider that big. That's a big number to see that many new people who hadn't ridden transit before now riding transit. So we're happy about that. They have noted that that they have come because of increased frequency and free fares. Those percentages are proportionate to those respondents. Yes.
You have you gather information about how long they lived in the city? Like, are these new people who are coming to Alexandria in part because this investments in transit making it more attractive to transit-oriented people, or are these longtime residents sort of jumping into this?
As one of my council members, yes to both. I would say that we don't know on a very granular level exactly the details. We do have correlated in the responses. We can kind of filter out and get an understanding of their other patterns. And so we tried to really isolate out people who were really unique to Dash in this percentage, right? And while I can't answer your question with complete certainty, I can say that with good confidence, we think that there are more people who have chosen to ride Dash for new purposes than may have ridden before. I can't say whether they moved to Alexandria because of that. I would like to think they did. But I think that, again, post-pandemic, right, people are now working in a different environment. They're going to work and going to school and going to other places throughout the day. You see that everywhere. You see that in traffic patterns. You see that in the use of other transit modes, right? So I think that that's another piece of this. They have been able to use the service in different hours and different times of the day, and that might also be a reason that they decide to hop on. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, and I want to let him finish.
Yeah, no, sorry, Mr. Baker, just to drive your point home a little bit more, I've been on the bus at noon, tons of people on there going to do their daily business. Another one that I think was very poignant is when I ride the bus at 11 o'clock. I'm coming from City Hall, you'll see 10, 20 people sitting on the steps outside of City Hall because they're all waiting to get on these Dash buses. And it's not just for one route, it's for all the routes that go by there. So very, very much true.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. So last two bullet points here, 67% of those responding to our survey have indicated that this has actually improved their perception of Dash. We thought that was an important metric to understand. So how do you see Fare Free as impacting the quality of the service for you? And again, the primary concerns reflective of my previous slide, overcrowding, feelings of onboard safety and comfort issues. Again, more people you put in an enclosed space, particularly when you have folks who may not be up to good, that creates some concerns. The next slide here is another representation. This is from the survey. These are other things we asked. What was the most important factors for Dash customers who are riding more often? So if you're riding more often, why? What are the most important factors? And you see increased frequency and free fares, both being above 35% of the response. No other areas are talking about that. In fact, higher fuel prices, which this survey was taken back when fuel was even worse, is the lowest component here. So again, a little takeaway there to understand. The next page talks about our next steps. This is really important for us. Going Fare Free, one of the challenges is How do you keep track of how people are using the service? We don't have smart trip taps anymore. One challenge we've had, particularly in our community, we have a lot of people asking us, how many students are you transporting? Well, I used to be able to tell them that because we would issue separate cards for students to use. We don't do that anymore. So the way we figure that out now, pro tip, if anybody wants to figure this out, look at teacher work days or when schools are closed and figure out what the difference is between your typical ridership on that day. And that's about as close as we can get, but we feel pretty confident about that. APCs, or automated passenger counters, are fully equipped throughout our entire fleet and are currently being certified for the National Transit Database. We're hopeful to receive that certification by the end of August. Once that happens, the driver has to do nothing. All they do is drive the bus, pull up to the stop, open the doors. Those APCs will not only figure out where the bus is, what route it's on, what time of day, it will figure out how many people have boarded and alighted and at what location. We can then drop those on a map. We can look at them online, figure out exactly the usage patterns and tweak our services accordingly and provide better insights for our local officials to understand how are people using the system and whatnot. We will need to remove the fare box equipment, and that will happen when we implement the APCs. Our framework calls for us to put those in storage. And then we were going to start calling on any of you in this room who would like to purchase them from us. Starting taking bids now. And then we want to continue to look at how we're going to continue to fund fare free, working with our local elected officials to prioritize this. Continuing our passenger surveys, looking at new ways to partner with our school system and make sure that we're a good partner within the community and helping them understand how Dash is benefiting their students. And then again, continuing to address this ongoing passenger behavioral challenges. As I wrap up, there might be a slide with a cool little video. Okay, there is, good. So we were actually selected nationally by the Sierra Club back in February to celebrate Transit Equity Day. And they came to Alexandria. We hooked them up with one of our bus operators and let her tell the story of the impact the service is having. So drum roll if it will work. If you want to click the slide, let's see if it actually is. Yes, it's working. Make it louder.
The best part of my job is like engaging with the community, getting to know different walks of life, different lifestyles from different people, driving customers from point A to point B safely and efficiently, and letting them see this pretty face, you know. You're the captain of the ship. I kind of set the tone of the bus, you know, just greeting the passengers, good morning, good evening, good night, you know. Greeting them kind of makes them feel welcome on the bus. The free fares has helped out tremendously, especially with COVID. It's a hard time. Everybody's facing like hardships or loss of jobs. So it helps them out, you know, they probably need to go to a job or a job interview. So you're helping them out get into that job interview. Somebody needs to go to a doctor appointment because they, you know, they battling COVID. You're helping them get to their appointments, just getting around the city and going about their daily lives. The electric bus is more quieter than a fossil fuel. With a fossil fuel, you have the possibility of intaking fumes. It's more cleaner because it's electric, obviously, so which is better for the environment, you know, less pollution. Especially what's going on now in the world with global warming and changes of the weather is we're trying to help contribute giving back to the environment, right? Every single customer always, thank you, you know, as they're leaving the bus, they make sure they come from the back of the bus to the front of the bus just to tell me, thank you. You know, you did a good job. Oh, that makes me feel very wonderful.
So I love stuff like this because it showcases the people that we're all here for and who are out there getting the job done for us. So we're really proud of her. So I will happily take questions.
Well, first of all, thank you and congratulations to you and to your council members who are here and not here today. Amazing work, and I love that video. And so, you know, I think I'm trying to be super brief because I know it's getting late in the day, but the numbers, right? We know, like for us as a county, I'll tell Malcolm that you'll be giving him some of this, but I think what's interesting is thinking back to like when Circulator started in DC and brought that service in here, that it's increased frequency 52% and free fares 44%. Though at the top, but increased frequency is still really high, right? And so if we start to look at, especially in larger areas, what are those places where that biggest bang for our buck, where can we really look at maybe piloting different kinds of programs? And I think understanding that the frequency and the free fares are so critical for all the riders, and then includes the equity piece in it as well as let's get more riders on. So, I mean, I think it's very exciting. Let me see if anyone else has questions, but hopefully you all are going to continue, looks like the surveying, the data collection, being able to share that with us, because I think we love that we get to learn from you and your experiences.
And we're excited to tell you about them anytime. So thank you for that. I would just, on the heels of what you just said, and listening to the conversation about Metro, I have said a lot, and I've talked about our program throughout the country, and people have called me and asked how we're doing it, and what's the story within the community. And one of the biggest things I think, and I think this is not unique to Alexandria, although I give a lot of credit to Alexandria for this, I think this entire region does this very, very well, which is to view transit as an infrastructure. We are not a business. We are not a business. We're not here to make money. We're a means to drive the economy, right? And so when you reduce the barriers and make it possible for that infrastructure to be available to more people and to be used by more people, you further stimulate the economy. You further bring people to the area, and you make it a more viable region and a place people want to live. And so I'm really proud of what we've done in Alexandria, and I'm really proud of Northern Virginia for that, because I think that is a universal thing here. And it's a challenge, and I see it, when you're talking about Metro and you're talking about the funding challenges, how do we keep this vital service running? Because people are recognizing how that infrastructure plays in. So thank you for that.
Thank you again. Thank you so much, Josh. I think we have one question from Commissioner Turner, and then we'll let you get home. It's getting
Really quick, I grabbed Randy before we walked out, something to look at. I asked him if they had measured any kind of correlation between the free ridership in Alexandria and more rail rides. And he said there's too many variables to be able to isolate it that way. But I would be really interested to see if free bus rides equates to any kind of a bump in rail rides.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I appreciate that comment. That's a great thing to think about. We're constantly looking at these various ways to rethink understanding ridership, because traditionally it's always been how many times did they tap a card, right? How many people stepped on the bus, and that was about all we had to work with. And now we have these fantastic tools to understand more about that. So as we have more information, I'll be happy to share that all with all of you as we have.
Good. Well, thank you, and thanks for your
Thank you.
passion. I think you're the third transit professional I've talked to recently who started driving his bus in high school and college. I mean, so.
Yes, I was
Yeah.
19 years old.
There you
I still
go.
have my CDL.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
I'm gonna move us along. Item 6, unless we want, yes, okay, MBTT, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Goal Setting Methodology. We're so excited. She's been waiting so patiently. Brittany, I'll just let you go ahead and give your presentation to us, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you. In the kit, you'll have the detailed report of how the overall DBE goal was set. But today I would like to talk to you guys about the DBE process, the goal setting process, and give you some information about some of the wonderful things we've been doing in that space. Next slide. So what is a DBE? A disadvantaged business enterprise is a small business that is owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asians, and women are presumed to be socially and economically disadvantaged by definition. And to be considered economically disadvantaged, your personal net worth cannot exceed 1.32 million. Next slide. So the objective of the DBE program, what exactly are we trying to do? We want to remove barriers to the participation of DBEs in federal funded contracts. We want to level the playing field on which DBEs participate for those contracts. And we want to develop DBE firms so that they grow outside of the DBE program. When a DBE first enters the DBE program, their goal is to get enough contracting opportunities and make enough money so that they can grow out of the DBE program and begin bidding as primes. And we want to help them do that. Next slide. So the DBE goal requirement, according to FTA, any recipient who reasonably anticipates awarding more than $250,000 in FTA funds in a given year, we must develop an overall goal for DBE participation once every 3 years. So the first thing the MVTC does, we consider the federal funds we will go after and also the funds that we currently manage to see where there are new award opportunities. And then we consider where will there be new awards using those funds in the next 3 years. Through this analysis, we discovered that 3 projects fall within that threshold. The first is the Route 7 Design and Equal Work Analysis done by MVTC, and also 2 projects from the City of Alexandria. The Eisenhower pedestrian improvements, as well as the Potomac Yard Metroway extension. Next slide. So how exactly is the goal calculated? First thing we do is we unbundle large projects and break them up into smaller work categories to figure out where are the DB subcontracting opportunities. Next, we look for the DB firms in our market area using the Virginia DB Directory. Next, we look to figure out where are all the firms, DBE and non-DBE, in the market area using the census database. Then we take that information and plug it into the federal DBE goal formula, make a few adjustments, and then we get our goal. Our goal for the next 3 years is 16%. What this means is that we believe that 16% of the federal funds we'll manage over the next 3 years will go to DBE firms in Northern Virginia. Next slide. So how do we meet the goal? First thing we do is we place DBE goals on all FTA funded contracts. We then make sure that bidders demonstrate a good faith effort to meet the goal on those contracts. We then do site visits. Once the contract is awarded, we go on site to make sure that DBE firms are actually being used. In the early years of the DBE program, you will oftentimes hear horror stories about like a prime contractor would get the contract and then they'll say they have a DBE, but then don't really use the DBE. So then we go on site to make sure that the DBE firm is being used. We also verify prompt payment to make sure that the DBE firm is being paid on time. And we also check in with the DBE firm to make sure they are having a good experience. And then we report all that information to FTA twice a year. Next slide. So how are we doing? In the past, MVTC has passed all federal funds to our subs, Alexandria and Falls Church, to fund their transportation projects. We have assisted them in achieving the maximum amount of DBE participation in procurements funded using those federal funds that we passed to them. So this data shows what we've been able to help them achieve since our last DBE goal report in 2020. There was 14% DBE participation in new contracts. There was subcontracts awarded to Hispanic American, Asian Americans, as well as women-owned businesses. And there was over 1.6 million paid to DBEs on ongoing contracts. Next slide. And beyond the goals. Beyond setting DBE goals, we've done some great things in the DBE space. We provide technical assistance to our jurisdictional staff. So that would be helping them set DBE goals on their contracts, reviewing procurement documents to ensure compliance with FTA requirements, and assisting with DBE challenges when they arise. We also conduct DBE outreach to DBE firms to get their feedback on our goals and our goal setting process. Recently, we initiated a NOVA DBE Roundtable, which is a new initiative where I went out and partnered with my peers to have them come together so that we can talk about the challenges that we share in in administering the DB program and kind of share solutions and best practices. And we're gonna meet once a month to continue those conversations. And lastly, we also encourage small women and minority business participation on our state and local funded contracts. Thank you.
Well, Brittany, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I failed to mention that you are our Senior Grants and Procurement Manager and also our DBE Liaison Officer. So thank you. I know we had to push it to late in the evening and very excited for that. And let me see if Kate wants to add anything.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, obviously, you're now getting more in the federal space because we have that earmark. It was fantastic because Brittany had already been doing a lot of federal procurement work on behalf of our jurisdictions. So now we're right in the middle of it as well, directly being involved. So, but we do have an action. I just realized hopefully we still have a good number of folks here. Because it's really important that we get this report to FTA as a part of our federal requirements. So.
Very exciting. Let me, because of the chair, let me say quickly, I love that your efforts and what you're doing in proactive engagement. I would also say, I know our office of economic initiatives is doing quite a bit of work. So hopefully you're partnering with them and any of the other county jurisdictions so that we can learn from each other and continue to grow. And I see we're at 14%, the goal is 16%. So we're pretty close if I heard that correctly.
So that data shows the performance over the last 3 years, because we came in 2020 to ask for the same authorization. So this is just to give you a snapshot of how we performed over the last 3 years. And the goal then was 15%.
15, okay, yeah, perfect. Well, hopefully we're able to keep growing it as you continue to do this great work. But that's awesome. Thank you for what you've done. So to that, let me go ahead and see if I could have a motion to authorize the executive director submit MVT CSDBE goal setting methodology to the Federal Transit Administration. I have so moved, and I'll take a second, several seconds. Do we have anyone still online? Mr.
Nick Clementi, I vote yes.
Awesome, thanks. Good to hear you, Nick. Okay, sorry, all those in, any further discussion? All those in, yes.
I just want to say this is awesome work. Thanks for the roundtable in addition to everything. I know it's 9:17. I just wanted to say thank you for the work because it's so important.
Yeah, super incredible. Sorry, we have to cut it short tonight. Okay, so to that, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? And we did hear Mr. Clementi online, so the motion passes. Thank you.
Aye.
And thank you, Brittany. Now we are on to our very patient VRE. We have one action item, but first we have Mr. Dalton with us to give us his CEO report. And you know what? We don't have an August meeting, so we're gonna just, do this thoroughly now. And then the VRE Operations Board Chair, Walkinshaw, will also be presenting the action item and give an update on the VRE strategic retreat. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Madam Chair. Thank you. Commission members. Of course, you have the CEO report, which gives you information up through the end of May. In your packet, I'll just report that ridership did increase slightly over the May number, which historically we start seeing a decrease starting in June, but we did see a slight increase. Also, we've been working pretty hard the last couple of months to get our system on time performance up. Our Fredericksburg line for the month of June finally hit our target of 90% on time performance. Manassas line still lagging a little bit, but overall our system on time performance for the month of June is 88%. I did want to mention also that starting June 2nd, we started a Fare Free Friday campaign. And just from a ridership standpoint, for the month of June, our average daily ridership for just Fridays increased by about 40%. It's really been good for us. We have several objectives with that, in addition to just offering free rides, is give ourselves an opportunity to, to have more interaction with passengers, find out why are they riding, is there a chance that, that they could, that they could be using VRE as a mean for their primary commute. Again, as we found out in Fare Free September of last year, just giving folks an opportunity to remove that fare impediment, even if it's just for one trip, so they could figure out the rest of their trip, if you will. What station works for them, what schedule works for them. So anyway, that's positive. That'll continue on through the rest of the summer until September 1. So that's my report, Madam Chair.
Well, really appreciate that, Mr. Sullivan. And if I could ask, remind me, the Fare Free Friday, is that open-ended or is there an end date for that?
September 1st.
September 1st,
Yes,
okay.
so it'd be the first Friday of September.
Okay, thank you. So I missed that, but a good opportunity. And I think we've heard today quite a few models to try out Fare Free, whether it's for a day or longer, and see, and I think gathering the data is really important.
Absolutely.
So glad to see that 40%, wonderful. I think Mr. Rockenshine and I can take a Friday trip with the kiddos. All right, any questions for Mr. Dalton?
Just
Yes.
a quick question. What's the ridership now versus 2019?
The ridership now, just go back to the month of June. It's still about 35% of what we saw in June or in 2019.
Any other questions from Mr. Dalton?
I'll just say that on
Yeah,
that point, that question comes up a lot. That number is consistent with other commuter rail systems in the country. Commuter rail has taken a lot longer to recover than bus or heavy rail. And so Chair Pavlicek pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, from 2022 to 2023, VRE had the fastest ridership growth among commuter rail systems in the country. But commuter rail systems historically serve white collar workers who work in their offices 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. That's the most challenging group to get back. And I can talk a little bit about that when I give a summary of our retreat as well.
Yeah, no, that would be great. So yeah, not seeing any other comment, and I appreciate you raised that, and clearly with things changing, appreciate that. I think in addition to your normal operations, those Fare Free Fridays, hopefully can start to look at different or new kinds of riders, people who maybe their work lives have changed forever. This poses a unique challenge for your system. Yes, so to that, if there are no additional questions, let me turn it over to Mr. Walkinshaw.
So we have just one action item. The VRE Operations Board recommends commission approval of Resolution 2504 to approve and authorize the VRE CEO to submit 4 VRE projects to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for evaluation and funding consideration in its FY 2024 to 2029 6-year program. The 4 projects include the Alexandria Station improvements, Shacklick Road Station improvements, Franconia Springfield Station improvements, and the Broad Run expansion project.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions on this action?
I do.
Yes, Mr. Snyder.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the strategic retreat? In other words, some may ask, why are we authorizing putting projects in for a system that's at 25 or 30% ridership? So I know you have an answer to that, and I wanted it on the record before we took the action.
Sure. Well, I can jump ahead to the kind of summary of our retreat. So the VRE Operations Board had, I think it's our first retreat since COVID, something regularly the board did before COVID. And we're in the process of updating our system plan. So right now we're operating under our system plan 2040, and we're moving toward adoption of our system plan 2050, which is a long range plan for the entire system. And we conducted a survey across the region of our riders and of non-riders to figure out what is it going to take to bring new people to VRE, to bring previous riders back to VRE. And we discovered a few things in there. One that surprised me, maybe didn't surprise Rich and others, a real interest in express service. So the number one reason, this is probably true for all of our transit systems, we don't talk about. The reason people don't use transit is because they have a perception that it's faster to drive. So VRE has some very long routes. We were out at Crossroads in Fredericksburg to open a new facility last week. It's a very long way. We got people that come from Broad Run every day. So there's a real interest in express routes, also real interest in weekend service. We don't provide weekend service on VRE right now. So when we survey the community, they're interested to see that. We developed scenarios for ridership growth based on population growth in the region. And the answer to why will VRE ridership continue to grow steadily, even if telework continues, is that population growth in the region is going to happen where VRE lines are. So the fastest growing portions of the region are not the city of Falls Church or the Braddock District in Fairfax County. It's Western Prince William County, Fredericksburg, and Stafford. And that's where our lines are. And Metro doesn't serve those areas. So over the next 10 to 20 years, there will be dramatic population growth, and VRE has to be prepared to accommodate that. So coming out of our retreat, kind of the consensus of the operations board is that we want to do additional research and analysis providing express service, more express service than we had planned even under Transforming Rail in Virginia, and then additional analysis of even more weekend service than we might have planned under Transforming Rail in Virginia, because, and Director DeBrule is an expert on this, but a lot of the Transforming Rail in Virginia planning did take place in a pre-COVID era, pre-pandemic era, and now we're recognizing things are different. But one of the things that's just different is there's more demand for weekend service. So in terms of how does that connect to these projects, and Rich, you can jump in, all of that population growth I described, all of that intense interest in express and weekend service that I described, we need bigger platforms to accommodate bigger trains. So these are projects that have been in the works for a long time, but they're still going to be necessary as we plan towards 2050. And, Rich, you want to add anything to that with respect to these projects?
I'll just add that specifically with these projects, one of the situations we're in right now is that, being, the lack of the ability, if you will, to be a little bit more, nimble and responsive to some of the ridership pattern changes. And so what these projects in combination to, the Commonwealth's projects related to Transforming Rail in Virginia and additional projects that we also have, striving for that ultimate goal of where we have freight and passenger rail separation. Okay. And that gives us a lot more flexibility and nimbleness, if you will, to be able to react to the changes that we're seeing now, and of course, being able to react to changes and potentially in the future. So by keeping those projects in the pipeline and keeping them moving, helps in that area. Plus, frankly, part of what, when I talk about system performance and stuff, we still have a capacity issue out there, and that's not going to go away. There's going to be more freight trains. There's going to be more Amtrak trains. So being able to address that will not only, it has a long-term effect for us as well.
I think the other piece of the ridership puzzle is the fare policy, and speak for myself here, not the board, because I've been kind of more out front on this. I think we're going to have to move to a more flexible fare structure where we acknowledge that there's much more demand to ride VRE on some days of the week than others. And I think the Free Fare Friday summer is maybe demonstrating that if we're more flexible with our fare structure, we can even out the passenger levels, which is much more efficient. We're paying to run the trains on Friday anyway, right? It's not like they don't run on Friday. So we can get people on them at a zero fare or lower fare, and get them brought into the entire system that'll bring our ridership up. So, but I think the big issue with ridership is just going to be population growth over the next 10 to 30 years in the region. And There's not gonna be a new metro line going to Fredericksburg between now and then. There's not likely to be a new metro line going to Broad Run in Prince William County between now and then, but we're there. And we just gotta be prepared to serve people.
Madam Chair, I want to thank you for this discussion because I'm thinking ahead when I sit at NVTA, looking at projects that are competing against each other. What am I going to say? We're looking at this metro thing and we just had a long presentation about, we're looking at all these other needs. And this kind of conversation is very helpful in explaining what the value is of these projects. So thanks a lot. It's something that I've wanted for a while, and I'm glad that you provided that.
Yeah, and I think the other point to make there is that we don't talk enough probably about the economic development importance of VRE. And National Landing and Amazon HQ2 is the biggest example, but there's a lot of others. The FBI headquarters in Springfield, when we land, that will be another. If you're an FBI agent and you live in Fredericksburg or you're at Quantico, you can't take Metro to get to the new FBI headquarters in Springfield, but you'll be able to take VRE. So it's a big selling point for us in terms of economic development region also.
And again, thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you. And Mr. Alcorn.
Yeah, just very quickly, one other thing that wasn't mentioned, the role of the federal employee in terms of ridership traditionally on VRE has been very federal employee focused, I would say. Majority of the ridership in 2019, that's coming back as well. So stay tuned. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Seeing no further comments, or questions, we're flipping back to the motion. So if I could have a motion to approve resolution 25.
Yeah, I'll move approval of resolution 25.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Aye.
Was that in favor, Mr. Clemente?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I believe that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, James. Thank you, VRE. Really appreciate you being here. And we will send it over to Director DeBrule for her report.
I will be very brief. You have a written report in your packet for tonight. I will flag a couple of things for you. There are annual certifications that WMATA has to do to the Commonwealth associated with the dedicated capital funding, including the confirmation of the 3% cap. We received all the certifications from WMATA. We are going to do our annual review. We'll be presenting the findings of that review to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in September. The Commonwealth Transportation Board will be meeting in Northern Virginia in October in conjunction with the Governor's Transportation Conference. Randy Clark and Paul Smedberg will be on that agenda in accordance with the code change that was made earlier this year. And then we anticipate CTB action in that meeting on the annual certification. So since Randy mentioned that talking to the CTB, I wanted to go ahead and say that's all kind of lined up for later this month.
Thank you very much. Dr. DeBrule, any questions or comments? Perfect, thank you. Good to see you in person.
Be here.
And I will now turn it over to our executive director for her report.
Thank you. So once again, we have a fantastic newsletter with highlights of many of the things that have been going over the last month. We actually are going to be sending this out digitally on Fridays following the commission meeting in a new format. So you guys keep an eye for that in a digital format. Just as a reminder, we do not have another commission meeting until September. However, we do have some committee meetings. Thursday, July 20th, we do have a WMATA committee meeting upstairs at 6 p.m. On the 26th, we have a program advisory committee meeting at 4 p.m. And on August 31st, we do have a legislative and policy committee meeting at 6 p.m. And again, all of these will be in person. And so obviously we always send out materials a week ahead of time. So keep your eyes open for those. And again, our next meeting is on September 5th with the executive committee meeting prior to upstairs. Of course, as always, we've included our financial reports in the materials, and that concludes my report.
Excuse me, did you say it was 6 p.m. on August 31st?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Budget policy and this this time around are all in person.
They are all in person. For the code, we need to alternate. Yep.
Well, thank you. Other than those of you who have committee meetings, appreciate all the work. You've worked hard for that August break. And we will see you back here on September 15th. Sorry, 5th. Wait about that. September 5th. All right, any final comments, questions, concerns? All right, well, with that, we are adjourned at 9:46 PM. Have a wonderful August relapse.